The woman scrubbing floors spoke 6 languages. The billionaire standing 3 feet away had no idea. When Alexander Cole's $500 million deal began collapsing in real time, surrounded by executives who couldn't understand a word of Mandarin coming through the speakerphone, Salvation stood silently behind a cleaning cart. Emily Carter had spent years invisible, perfecting her disappearing act, hiding brilliance behind a mop and lowered eyes. But today, silence would cost too much. This is her story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this journey travels. The Skyline Grand Hotel didn't just tower over Chicago's financial district. It existed in its own atmosphere, where oxygen cost more and ordinary problems simply didn't reach the 47th floor. Alexander Cole stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the executive lounge, phone pressed to his ear, watching ant-sized people navigate sidewalks below. At 38, he'd built an empire that spanned continents. His company's name opened doors that stayed locked to others. His signature on a contract could change entire industries overnight. But right now, none of that mattered, because the voice on the other end of the line was speaking Mandarin, and Alexander's translator had called in sick. "Mr. Chen, I understand your concerns," Alexander began, but the rapid-fire response cut him off, words tumbling over each other in a language that might as well have been ancient hieroglyphics, for all he could decipher. 3 executives sat at the mahogany table behind him, laptops open, faces carefully neutral. They were paid 6 figures to solve problems. Currently, they were solving nothing. "Can someone get Lou on the line?" Alexander asked, not bothering to hide the edge in his voice. Marcus, his head of operations, shook his head. "She's not answering. Must still be dealing with that family emergency." Perfect. Absolutely perfect. 5 months of negotiations were circling the drain because of a language barrier and spectacularly bad timing. Alexander had learned many things building his empire from the ground up. How to read a room, how to spot opportunity in chaos, how to make impossible decisions with incomplete information. He'd mastered the art of projecting confidence even when doubt clawed at his insides. But he'd never bothered learning Mandarin, an oversight that was currently costing him roughly $100,000 per minute. The voice on the speaker continued, tone shifting from explanatory to something sharper. Even without understanding the words, Alexander recognized frustration when he heard it. "Mr. Chen, please." Alexander tried again, but the line went silent. Not the comfortable silence of someone pausing to think. The hollow silence of a disconnected call. Marcus winced. Jennifer, the legal advisor, closed her laptop with a soft click that sounded like a nail in a coffin. David, the youngest executive, just stared at the speakerphone like it had personally betrayed him. "Call him back," Alexander said quietly. Marcus dialed. The phone rang once, twice, voicemail. "Try again." Same result. Alexander's jaw tightened. He'd started his company in a garage apartment 10 years ago with nothing but student loan debt and a half-formed idea. He'd survived the market crash of 2020, 3 attempted hostile takeovers, and a divorce that made tabloid headlines for 6 months. He didn't lose, especially not to a dropped phone call. "Get me every Mandarin translator in Chicago," he said. "I don't care what they're doing. Pull them off other jobs. Offer double rates, triple if necessary." "Sir, it's Sunday morning," Jennifer pointed out gently. "Most agencies won't even answer. Then find the ones who will." The executives scattered like pool balls after a break, phones appearing in hands, fingers flying across screens. Alexander returned to the window, pressing his palm against the cool glass. Somewhere in Shanghai, Mr. Chen was probably having a similar conversation with his own team, maybe reconsidering the partnership entirely, maybe calling competitors who didn't let language barriers torpedo critical negotiations. The reflection in the window showed a man who looked calm, composed, completely in control. It was a good performance. Alexander had gotten very good at performances over the years. Ever since the funeral, really. Ever since he'd stood in front of a small gathering, holding his daughter's hand, and delivered a eulogy that didn't crack once. Ever since he'd nodded at condolences and accepted casseroles and smiled when people said time heals all wounds. 3 years later, time had proven to be a mediocre physician at best. But that wasn't something the executives needed to know. That wasn't something anyone needed to know. Behind him, Marcus was speaking rapidly into his phone. Yes, I understand it's your day off. I'm offering $5,000 for 2 hours of work. Hello? Hello? He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at it. They hung up. David had better luck. I've got someone who might be available in 3 hours. We don't have 3 hours, Alexander interrupted. Chen will have signed with Nakamura's company by then. It was true. Nakamura had been circling this deal like a shark for months, waiting for exactly this kind of opening. The lounge door swung open, and Harold, the hotel's general manager, entered with the kind of practiced smile that suggested he'd already heard about the crisis and was here to perform damage control. Mr. Cole, I heard about your translator situation. I've reached out to several professional services, but given the time and short notice— I know, Alexander cut him off. Thank you, Harold. Harold hesitated, reading the room's temperature correctly. If there's anything else the hotel can provide, privacy would be good. Of course. Harold retreated with the same smooth efficiency he'd entered with, Doctor clicking shut behind him. The lounge fell quiet, except for the muted sounds of executives making increasingly desperate phone calls. Alexander checked his watch. 9:47 a.m. In 13 minutes, he had a scheduled call with his daughter. Sunday mornings were sacred. No meetings, no emergencies, just him and Lily. Video calls when he traveled, pancakes, and terrible jokes when he was home. This morning, he was supposed to be home. Instead, he was here, watching a critical deal disintegrate because the universe had a sense of humor. His phone buzzed. Lily's face appeared on the screen, all wild curls and missing front teeth. Alexander answered immediately, stepping away from the others. Hey, Pumpkin. Daddy, you said you'd be home. The accusation was clear, even through a 7-year-old's lisp. I know, sweetheart, I'm sorry. Something came up at work. Something always comes up. Not angry, just resigned, which somehow felt worse. Alexander's chest tightened. I'll be home tonight, I promise. We'll make those chocolate chip pancakes you like. With extra chocolate chips? So many chocolate chips, it's basically chocolate with pancake chips. That earned him a giggle. That's silly, Daddy. I'm a silly guy. Mrs. Morrison says silly is good. She says grown-ups forget how. Mrs. Morrison was Lily's second-grade teacher and apparently a philosopher. Mrs. Morrison sounds very smart, Alexander said. She is. She knows everything, almost as much as you. If only that were true. If he knew everything, he'd know Mandarin. He'd know how to be in 2 places at once. He'd know how to explain to a 7-year-old why work kept stealing her father away. He'd know how to fill the space her mother left behind. I have to go, Pumpkin, but I'll call you later, okay? Okay, love you, Daddy. Love you more, sir. The screen went dark. Alexander slipped his phone back into his pocket and turned to find all 3 executives pretending they hadn't been listening. Any luck? He asked, though he could read the answer on their faces. Still trying, Marcus said, which was diplomatic code for no. Alexander walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. He wasn't a man who believed in giving up, but he was practical enough to recognize when a situation had passed the point of salvaging. Call Nakamura, he said quietly. Tell him we're open to discussing partnership terms. Jennifer's eyes widened. Sir, we can't complete this deal without translation services, and we can't wait for translation services without losing the deal. Nakamura speaks fluent Mandarin. He also speaks fluent opportunism. He'll lowball us, but at least we'll get something out of the negotiation. It was the smart play, the logical play. Alexander hated every word of it. Marcus reached for his phone, then paused. Sir, are you certain? If we just wait a few more hours— Chen won't wait a few more hours. Make the call. The defeat in the room was palpable, heavy as smoke, and that's when the door opened. Emily Carter had perfected the art of invisibility over 26 years. It wasn't magic. It was technique. Keep your head down. Make your movements small. Wear neutral colors. Avoid eye contact. Speak only when spoken to, and even then, keep answers brief. Exist, but barely. It was a survival skill she'd learned young and refined to a science. This morning, she was running behind schedule. The executive lounge was supposed to be cleaned by 9:30 a.m., but a spill on the 42nd floor had derailed her entire routine. Now it was nearly 10 o'clock, and she could hear voices inside the lounge, which meant people were still using it, which meant she'd have to come back later, which meant her entire day's timing would cascade into chaos. Emily hated chaos. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. The voices weren't conversational. They were tense, stressed. Someone was having a very bad morning. She should come back later. But then she heard it. Mandarin. Not from inside the room, from a speakerphone maybe. The words were rapid, clipped, frustrated. Emily's hand froze on the door handle. She hadn't heard Mandarin spoken fluently in months, not since she'd stopped going to the library for practice sessions with old audio files. Not since she'd accepted that the dream of using her language skills for anything meaningful was just that, a dream. The voice on the speaker continued, and Emily found herself translating automatically in her head. This is unacceptable. We were assured your team understood the cultural significance of these negotiations. Your failure to provide adequate translation services demonstrates a lack of respect that I cannot overlook. Emily bit her lip. Someone was losing a deal. A big one, from the sound of it. Someone who needed a translator. She should walk away. She should absolutely, definitely walk away. Her hand pushed the door open. Alexander looked up as the door swung inward. A young woman stood in the doorway, one hand on a cleaning cart, the other gripping the door handle like it might escape. She wore the hotel's standard housekeeping uniform, navy blue dress, white apron, name tag that read Emily. Her eyes were wide, almost frightened. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll come back." "It's fine," Alexander said, though his tone suggested it very much wasn't. "We're finished here anyway." Emily should have nodded and left. Instead, she stayed frozen in the doorway, staring at the speakerphone on the table. The silence stretched awkwardly. "Did you need something?" Marcus asked, not unkindly. Emily's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I heard," she swallowed hard. "The person on the phone. They were speaking Mandarin." Alexander's attention sharpened. "You speak Mandarin?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Emily's first instinct was to say no, to apologize again and leave, to retreat back into the safety of invisibility where expectations were low and disappointment was impossible. But the voice on the recording, even disconnected, even gone, still echoed in her head. This is unacceptable. She thought about Sunday mornings in her studio apartment, Mandarin audio files playing while she cleaned. About her mother's old book, pages worn soft from constant handling. About every time she'd bitten back words in 6 different languages because nobody asked the cleaning lady what she thought. "Yes," Emily heard herself say, "I speak Mandarin." The executives exchanged glances. Alexander stood up slowly, studying her with an intensity that made Emily want to dissolve into the carpet. "Fluently?" he asked. Yes. I taught myself. I know it's not the same as formal education, but I've been practicing for years, and I can read and write traditional and simplified characters. And I understand most dialects, though my accent is probably Beijing standard because that's what the audio files... She was babbling. She knew she was babbling, but nerves had hijacked her mouth, and words just kept spilling out. "Can you help us?" Alexander interrupted gently. Emily blinked. "Help you?" "Translate. We have a critical business call with a partner in Shanghai, but our translator is unavailable. If you can really speak Mandarin fluently, you could save us a significant amount of time and money." This was insane. This was absolutely insane. Emily cleaned floors, she scrubbed toilets, she wiped down mirrors and vacuumed carpets and emptied trash bins. She did not translate for business executives in designer suits discussing deals worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime. I'm not qualified." "Can you translate business Mandarin?" Alexander asked simply. Could she? Emily thought about the finance podcasts she'd listened to in Mandarin, the business journals she'd read online, the economic news broadcasts she'd streamed while folding laundry. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "Then you're qualified." Alexander gestured to an empty chair. "Please." Emily looked at the chair like it might bite her. This was a mistake. This had to be a mistake. But Alexander was already dialing, and Marcus was pulling out the chair, and Jennifer was offering an encouraging smile, and Emily found herself moving forward. She left her cleaning cart in the hallway. She sat down in a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She folded her hands in her lap to hide the shaking. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice answered in Mandarin. Wei? Alexander looked at Emily. Emily looked at her hands. Then she took a breath and spoke. Hello, Mr. Chen. This is Emily Carter calling on behalf of Mr. Alexander Cole. I apologize for the earlier confusion. We're ready to continue our discussion if you're still available. Her voice was steady, clear, confident in a way she never sounded in English. The silence on the other end lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, You speak excellent Mandarin, Miss Carter. Where did you study? I'm self-taught, sir. I hope that won't be a concern. A pause, then something that might have been a chuckle. Self-taught? Impressive. Very well. Let us continue. And just like that, Emily Carter stopped being invisible. Chut. The next hour passed in a blur. Emily translated. Mr. Chen spoke. Alexander responded. Emily converted English to Mandarin, Mandarin to English, building bridges between languages and cultures with words that flowed like water. The contract terms were complex: tariff structures, shipping logistics, cultural compliance requirements for marketing materials. Emily navigated all of it, occasionally asking for clarification, sometimes suggesting phrasing adjustments that better honored Chinese business customs. Mr. Chen is concerned about the proposed timeline, Emily said during one exchange. He's not saying no, but in Chinese business culture, the way he's phrasing his concerns suggests he needs reassurance about your company's ability to meet deadlines without sacrificing quality. Alexander nodded slowly. Can you tell him we're willing to build in buffer periods and provide weekly progress reports? Emily translated, adding subtle linguistic touches that conveyed respect and partnership rather than just compliance. Mr. Chen's response was warmer. Marcus scribbled notes furiously. Jennifer's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. David just stared at Emily like she'd materialized from thin air, which, from their perspective, she basically had. At 11:15 a.m., Mr. Chen said something that made Emily smile. He's agreeing to the partnership, she translated. He says Mr. Cole's willingness to find solutions instead of making excuses demonstrates the kind of integrity he values in business relationships. Alexander's shoulders dropped. Not in defeat, but in relief so profound it was almost visible. Thank him, Alexander said. Tell him we're honored by his trust. Emily did, adding a traditional expression of gratitude that made Mr. Chen laugh warmly. The call ended 10 minutes later with agreements to have contracts drafted by both legal teams, reviewed, and signed within 2 weeks. When the line disconnected, the lounge was silent. Then Marcus let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for an hour. That was... He trailed off, apparently lacking words. Incredible, Jennifer finished. David just shook his head, grinning. Alexander was still looking at Emily, expression unreadable. Emily stood up quickly, chair scraping against expensive carpet. I need to get back to work. I'm behind on my rounds, and... Wait, Alexander said. It wasn't a command, just a simple request. But Emily froze anyway. What's your full name? Alexander asked. Emily Carter, sir. How long have you worked here, Emily? 3 years? And in those 3 years, has anyone ever asked if you spoke Mandarin? Emily's laugh was short, bitter. No one ever asked if I spoke anything, sir. The truth of that statement hung heavy in the air. Alexander nodded slowly, like confirming something. Thank you for stepping in. You saved us today. I heard the call and I thought... Emily trailed off, not sure how to finish. You thought you could help, Alexander finished. And you did. Emily nodded, backing toward the door. I really should go. Of course. But Emily? She paused, hand on the doorframe. This conversation isn't over. It sounded like a promise. Or maybe a warning. Emily wasn't sure which scared her more. She grabbed her cleaning cart and fled, heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard Marcus say, Sir, what just happened? And Alexander's response, quiet but certain, I'm not entirely sure. But I think we just found someone remarkable. Emily made it to the service elevator before the adrenaline crash hit. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely press the button for the 39th floor. When the elevator doors closed, she slumped against the wall, breathing hard. What had she just done? She'd interrupted a business meeting, inserted herself into a situation where she absolutely didn't belong, spoken to executives like she had any right to their time or attention. The old Emily, the careful, invisible Emily, would never have been so reckless. But the voice on the speaker had been so frustrated, and she'd understood every word, and the solution had been right there in her head. Her phone buzzed. A text from Raj, another housekeeper. "Where are you? Manager is looking for you. You're 45 minutes behind schedule." Emily's stomach dropped. She was behind. She was so far behind. And now her manager was involved, which meant there would be questions and possibly write-ups, and the elevator dinged. 39th floor. Emily pushed off the wall, grabbed her cart, and started moving. She could worry about consequences later. Right now, she had 17 rooms to clean before her shift ended. Alexander stood at the lounge window long after Emily had left, watching the city below without really seeing it. "Sir?" Marcus ventured carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Alexander said slowly, "that I've been in this hotel dozens of times. I've probably walked past that woman 100 times and never once actually saw her." "She's housekeeping staff," David pointed out. "They're trained to be unobtrusive." "No," Alexander said. "We're trained not to notice them. There's a difference." Jennifer closed her laptop. "Are you seriously considering this?" "Considering what?" "Whatever you're considering. I can see the wheels turning, Alex. You get that look when you're about to do something unconventional." Alexander turned to face them. "Define unconventional." "In this case, probably offering a housekeeping employee a position in our company based on a single phone call." "She saved a $500 million deal," Alexander said mildly. "She did," Marcus agreed. "But Jennifer has a point. We don't know anything about her. Education, background, work history beyond hotel housekeeping." "I know she speaks fluent Mandarin," Alexander interrupted. "I know she understood complex business negotiations well enough to navigate them successfully. I know she had the courage to step into a room where she clearly didn't feel she belonged because she saw a problem she could solve." He paused. "How many people with impressive resumes would have done the same?" The executives exchanged glances. "You're serious about this," Jennifer said. "I'm considering it seriously," Alexander corrected. "I need to know more. Background, skills, why someone with her obvious talents is cleaning hotel rooms." "Could be a dozen reasons," Marcus said. "Economic necessity, immigration status issues, lack of formal credentials, all of which can be addressed." Alexander pulled out his phone. "I'm going to make some calls, see what we can find out." "Sir?" David said hesitantly. "Even if her background checks out, there's the optics to consider. Hiring someone directly from hotel housekeeping into an executive position." "I didn't say executive position," Alexander said. "I said I'm considering it. Let's gather information before we jump to conclusions." But even as he said it, Alexander's mind was already moving ahead, connecting dots, seeing possibilities. His company needed translators. More than that, they needed cultural consultants who understood both language and context. They were expanding into Asian markets rapidly, and every delay due to miscommunication cost time and money. But it was more than business pragmatism driving his thoughts. It was the look on Emily's face when she'd said, "No one ever asked if I spoke anything, sir." Like she'd been waiting years for someone to ask the right question. Alexander understood that feeling better than most people realized. The phone in his hand buzzed. Lily's name appeared on the screen. He answered immediately. "Hey, Pumpkin, everything okay?" "Mrs. Morrison's sister speaks Chinese," Lily announced excitedly. "She came to visit today, and they were talking in Chinese at lunch, and it was so cool, Daddy." Alexander smiled despite himself. "That does sound cool. Do you speak Chinese?" "No, sweetheart, I don't." "You should learn. Then you could talk to Mrs. Morrison's sister." "Maybe I should," Alexander agreed. "Or maybe I should hire someone who already can," he thought. After he hung up, Marcus was watching him with knowing expression. "What?" Alexander asked. "Nothing," Marcus said. "Just recognizing that look. The one you get right before you completely ignore conventional wisdom and do exactly what you were going to do anyway." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Of course not, sir." Alexander smiled slightly. Make some calls, quietly. I want to know everything about Emily Carter by tomorrow morning. Already on it, Marcus said, phone in hand. Sas. Emily finished her shift at 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes later than scheduled, despite working through her lunch break. Her manager, Mrs. Patterson, had been mercifully brief when Emily finally caught up with her. A warning about staying on schedule, a reminder that the hotel's reputation depended on consistency, a pointed look that suggested this better not happen again. Emily had nodded through all of it, apologizing, promising to do better. She didn't mention the business call, didn't mention speaking Mandarin, didn't mention anything that might sound like an excuse, no matter how legitimate. Because in her experience, explanations just made things worse. Now, riding the Red Line home, Emily stared at her reflection in the train window and wondered if the entire morning had been some kind of fever dream. Had she really translated for a business executive? Had he really thanked her? Had he really said, "This conversation isn't over"? Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate, Sarah. "Working late again. Pizza in fridge if you want it." Emily smiled tiredly. Sarah was a graphic designer who kept hours as irregular as Emily's were rigidly structured. They'd been roommates for 2 years and friends for slightly less than that. The kind of comfortable friendship built on shared rent payments and occasional late-night conversations. The train lurched to a stop. Emily's station. She climbed the stairs to street level, pulling her jacket tighter against October wind that cut through the fabric like it wasn't there. Their apartment was a third-floor walk-up in a building that had been old when the century was young. The stairs creaked, the radiator clanked. The window in Emily's bedroom didn't quite close all the way, but it was affordable and safe, and hers. Emily unlocked the door, kicked off her shoes, and made a beeline for the shower. 20 minutes later, clean and wearing her softest pajamas, she padded into the kitchen and found Sarah's promised pizza. Half a deep dish that was probably 3 days old but still perfectly edible. She was 2 slices in when her phone rang. Unknown number. Emily almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers were usually spam, or worse, creditors looking for her late father. But something made her pick up. "Hello? Emily Carter?" A professional voice, male, vaguely familiar. "Yes?" "This is Marcus Chen. We met earlier today at the Skyline Grand Hotel. I was in the meeting you helped translate." Emily's pizza suddenly felt very heavy in her stomach. "Oh, yes. Hi. I apologize for calling so late on a Sunday evening. Do you have a moment to talk?" Emily's mind raced. Why would he be calling? Had she made a mistake in the translation? Had she offended Mr. Chen somehow? Was this about being behind schedule? Yes. I have a moment." "Excellent, Mr. Cole wanted me to reach out personally. He'd like to speak with you tomorrow morning, if you're available. Would 9 a.m. work?" Emily's brain stuttered. "Tomorrow morning?" "At our offices downtown. I can text you the address. I work tomorrow. My shift starts at 7. "We'd be happy to accommodate your schedule," Marcus said smoothly. "What time works best for you?" This was real. This was actually happening. "I don't understand," Emily said slowly. "Why does Mr. Cole want to meet with me?" "He'd prefer to discuss that in person, but I can assure you it's nothing negative. Quite the opposite, actually." Emily sat down at the kitchen table, pizza forgotten. "Can you give me a hint? I've been anxious all day, wondering if I did something wrong." "You did nothing wrong," Marcus said firmly. "Mr. Cole was extremely impressed by your skills and your initiative. That's all I'm authorized to say right now, but truly, Ms. Carter, this is a positive conversation." "A positive conversation?" Emily's hands were shaking again. "Okay, she heard herself say. "I can be there at 9 a.m. "Perfect. I'll text you the address and visitor parking information. Thank you, Ms. Carter." The line went dead. Emily stared at her phone like it had transformed into something unfamiliar. Then she pulled up her contacts and called the one person who might understand. Sarah answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" "Something weird happened today," Emily said. "Weird how?" So Emily told her. All of it. The business call, the translation, the executive who'd looked at her like she mattered. Sarah listened without interrupting, which was one of her best qualities. When Emily finished, there was a long pause. Then, "Holy shit." "Yeah." Emily, this could be huge. This could be life-changing. Or it could be nothing, Emily said, trying to keep her hopes in check. Maybe he just wants to say thank you in person. Maybe he's going to offer me a small bonus. Maybe he's going to offer you a job, Sarah interrupted. A real job. Using your actual skills instead of scrubbing toilets. Emily's throat tightened. Don't say that. If I let myself hope, then hope, Sarah said fiercely. For once in your life, Emily, let yourself hope for something good. You deserve it. Did she? Emily wasn't sure, but tomorrow morning she'd find out. After they hung up, Emily sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the address Marcus had texted her. The Cole Building. Downtown. 37th floor. She should sleep. She had to be up in 6 hours, but sleep felt impossible. So instead, Emily pulled out her laptop and did what she always did when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. She studied. She pulled up Mandarin business journals and read until her eyes burned, reviewed formal greeting protocols, practiced professional phrases she might need, prepared for a conversation that might change everything. Or nothing. Tomorrow would tell. Emily woke at 4:30 a.m. without an alarm, heart already racing. She lay in the darkness of her small bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of the building settling around her. Mrs. Kowalski upstairs running water, the radiator beginning its morning symphony of clanks and hisses. Somewhere distant, a car alarm wailing before cutting off abruptly. Normal sounds. A normal Monday morning. Except nothing about today felt normal. Emily threw off her blankets and padded to the bathroom, flipping on the light. The mirror showed what it always showed. A tired 26-year-old with dark circles under her eyes and hair that needed a trim she couldn't afford. She stared at her reflection and tried to imagine what Alexander Cole had seen yesterday. Probably just someone convenient, someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right skills. Nothing more complicated than that. Emily showered quickly, the hot water barely lasting 5 minutes before turning lukewarm. She dried off, pulled on her most professional outfit, black pants that were slightly too big, a white blouse she'd found at Goodwill, a cardigan with only one small snag near the hem, and attempted something presentable with her hair. The result was passable. Maybe. In the kitchen, she made coffee strong enough to strip paint and force down half a piece of toast her stomach didn't want. Nerves had stolen her appetite entirely. Sarah's bedroom door was closed, gentle snoring audible through the thin walls. Emily scribbled a quick note. Meeting went well. Will explain later, and left it on the counter next to the coffee pot. Then she grabbed her bag, double-checked that she had the address, and stepped out into the pre-dawn cold. The city was just beginning to wake. Street cleaners rumbled past. Early shift workers trudged toward L stations. A homeless man wrapped in a sleeping bag stirred in the doorway of a closed storefront, and Emily dropped the $5 bill she'd been saving for lunch into his cup without breaking stride. She couldn't explain why. Maybe superstition, maybe paying karma forward, maybe just the desperate hope that kindness counted for something. The red line was nearly empty at this hour. Emily claimed a seat near the door and watched the darkness outside give way to the gray promise of morning. Her reflection in the window looked ghostly, insubstantial, like she might disappear entirely if she stopped concentrating on existing. She'd felt that way for years, ever since her mother died, really. Ever since the funeral where distant relatives had murmured condolences and promised to stay in touch and then vanished back to their own lives. Ever since she'd realized that in the entire world she was completely alone. No siblings, no close family. No safety net beyond her own 2 hands and whatever work those hands could find. She'd survived by becoming small, unnoticeable, a shadow that cleaned up after other people's messes and asked for nothing in return. It had kept her safe. But safety, Emily was beginning to realize, had cost her almost everything else. The train lurched to a stop at Washington/State. Emily stood, gripping the pole as the doors hissed open, and stepped out onto the platform. Downtown Chicago rose around her like a canyon of glass and steel. The Cole Building was 10 blocks north, a sleek tower that probably had its own zip code and definitely had more square footage than Emily's entire neighborhood. She started walking. The streets filled gradually as she went, professionals in expensive suits carrying expensive briefcases, talking on expensive phones about things that probably cost more than Emily made in a year. They flowed around her like water around a stone, barely registering her presence. Just another invisible person in a city full of them. Emily checked her phone. 8:47 a.m. The Cole building loomed ahead, all chrome and tinted glass, reflecting the morning sky in shades of silver and blue. Emily pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that looked like someone had tried to build heaven and settled for something merely perfect. Marble floors, modern art that probably cost 6 figures. A security desk staffed by 2 guards who looked like they could bench press a compact car. Emily approached slowly, clutching her bag. "Hi," she said. "I have a meeting with Emily Carter?" The guard, his name tag read Rodriguez, was already nodding. 37th floor. They're expecting you." They were expecting her. Rodriguez handed her a visitor badge and gestured toward the elevators. "Have a good meeting, ma'am." "Ma'am." Like she was someone who mattered. Emily clipped the badge to her cardigan and walked to the elevators on legs that felt disconnected from her body. The doors opened silently. She stepped inside, pressed 37, and watched the lobby drop away. The elevator rose so smoothly she barely felt the movement. Floor numbers ticked past on a discrete digital display. 20, 25, 30. Emily's reflection stared back at her from the polished walls, multiplied into infinity by the mirrored surfaces. An army of nervous women in secondhand clothes, all wearing the same expression of barely controlled panic. The elevator chimed. 37. The doors opened onto a reception area that made the lobby look understated. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Chicago spreading out below like a promise. Modern furniture in shades of cream and chrome. Abstract sculptures that might have been art or might have been very expensive paperweights. And behind a curved desk that looked carved from a single piece of white stone, a receptionist who could have stepped out of a fashion magazine. She smiled warmly as Emily approached. "Ms. Carter?" "Yes?" "Welcome. Mr. Cole is running just a few minutes behind. Conference call with Singapore went long. Can I get you anything while you wait? Coffee? Tea? Water?" "Water would be great, thank you." The receptionist, her nameplate read Vanessa, stood gracefully and gestured toward a seating area near the windows. "Please make yourself comfortable. I'll let Mr. Cole's assistant know you're here." Emily sank into a chair that was somehow both modern and comfortable, accepting the glass of water Vanessa brought her. Ice clinked against the sides. Probably filtered water. Probably cost more per gallon than Emily paid for groceries. She sipped it anyway and tried not to stare at the view. From 37 floors up, Chicago looked manageable, ordered. Like all the chaos and struggle happened somewhere else. Somewhere these windows couldn't see. Emily wondered what that felt like, working somewhere like this. Whether the people who came here every day appreciated it, or whether luxury became invisible once you had enough of it. "Ms. Carter?" Emily looked up to find a woman in her 40s approaching, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, dark hair pulled into a sleek bun. "I'm Patricia Reeves, Mr. Cole's executive assistant. He's ready for you now." Emily stood quickly, nearly spilling her water. Patricia pretended not to notice, leading her down a hallway lined with more art, more windows, more evidence of wealth so profound it had stopped bothering to show off. They stopped at a door. Patricia knocked once, then opened it. "Miss Carter to see you, sir." "Thank you, Patricia." Emily stepped inside and the door clicked shut behind her. Alexander Cole stood at the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the same view Emily had been admiring moments ago. He turned as she entered, and the morning light caught his face, softening the sharp edges she remembered from yesterday. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming." "Of course, thank you for inviting me." He gestured to a chair in front of his desk. "Please, sit." Emily sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide the trembling. Alexander's office was large but not ostentatious. Dark wood desk, comfortable chairs, walls lined with bookshelves instead of corporate awards. Personal touches, a child's drawing framed on one shelf, a photo of a little girl grinning gap-toothed at the camera. Alexander settled into his own chair, studying Emily with the same intensity he'd shown yesterday. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "Yesterday, you saved my company a significant amount of money and a critical partnership. You did this without being asked, without expecting anything in return, and with a level of skill that frankly shocked everyone in that room." Emily's throat was dry despite the water. I heard the problem and thought I might be able to help. And that impulse to help, to step forward when stepping back would have been easier, tells me more about your character than any resume could. He leaned forward slightly. I had my team look into your background, he said, and Emily's stomach dropped. I hope that doesn't offend you. I needed to understand who you are. What did you find? Emily asked quietly. That you graduated top of your class from Roosevelt High School, that you were accepted to Northwestern with a partial academic scholarship, that you attended for one semester before withdrawing after your mother's death. Emily's hands tightened in her lap. That you've been working service jobs ever since, Alexander continued. Hotels, restaurants, retail. That you have no criminal record, no debt beyond what you inherited from your mother's medical bills, and no history of anything except showing up on time and working hard. He paused. I also found that you've been teaching yourself languages for years. Mandarin? Yes, but also Spanish, French, basic Arabic, and some Japanese. You use library computers for online courses. You check out audiobooks in different languages. You've essentially been building a graduate-level education out of free resources and sheer determination. Emily felt exposed, like someone had peeled back her skin and examined everything beneath. Why? Alexander asked simply. Why what? Why languages? Why spend years teaching yourself skills you weren't using? What were you hoping for? Emily looked down at her hands. They were rough from years of cleaning chemicals and hard work. Her mother's hands had looked the same. My mother was a housekeeper, she said quietly. She worked 60-hour weeks at 3 different hotels. She never complained, but I saw how tired she was, how invisible people made her feel. She swallowed hard. When I was in high school, there was this guest at one of the hotels where she worked, a businessman from China. He was frustrated because nobody could understand him, and he was yelling, and my mother she stood there and took it, because what else could she do? Emily's voice cracked slightly. I thought, if I could speak his language, I could help. I could make things easier for her. So I checked out a Mandarin book from the library and started teaching myself. And then? And then she got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it. I had to choose between school and taking care of her. The choice had been easy. The consequences had been devastating. After she died, Emily continued, I had medical debt and no degree and no real job prospects. So I did what I knew how to do. I cleaned hotel rooms just like she had. And I kept studying languages because... She trailed off. Because, Alexander prompted gently, because I needed to believe I was working towards something, Emily finished, even if I didn't know what. The office was quiet except for the muted sounds of the city beyond the windows. Alexander nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. I'm going to make you an offer, he said, and I want you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. My company is expanding rapidly into Asian markets. We need translators, yes. But more than that, we need cultural consultants, people who understand not just language, but context, nuance, the unspoken rules that make or break international business relationships. He stood, walking back to the window. You demonstrated all of that yesterday. You didn't just translate words, you navigated complex negotiations, understood cultural sensitivities, and built rapport with a partner who was ready to walk away. That's not something I can train. That's instinct combined with knowledge. Alexander turned to face her. I want to hire you as a cultural liaison for our international division. You'd start as an assistant consultant, working directly with our team on Chinese partnerships. The position comes with full benefits, salary commensurate with experience, and opportunities for advancement. Emily couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I don't have a degree, she managed. I don't care about degrees. I care about results. You proved you can deliver those. I've never worked in an office. I don't know corporate culture or business protocols or... You'll learn, Alexander said simply. We have training programs, mentorship opportunities. You're clearly capable of learning anything you set your mind to. Emily stood abruptly, pacing to the window because sitting still was impossible. Below, the city sprawled in every direction. Somewhere down there was her apartment with its leaky window, the hotel where she scrubbed toilets, the life she'd built out of necessity and resignation. Why me? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. You could hire someone with actual credentials, someone who won't need training, someone who won't see opportunities everyone else misses? Alexander interrupted. Someone who won't step forward when it matters because they're too concerned with protocols and hierarchies? He moved to stand beside her at the window. I've hired dozens of people with impressive resumes, Miss Carter. MBAs from top schools, years of experience, all the right credentials. And yesterday, when my deal was falling apart, not one of them had a solution. He looked at her directly. But you did. Because you paid attention. Because you cared enough to take a risk. That's worth more than any degree. Emily's reflection in the window showed a woman on the verge of something. She just couldn't tell if it was opportunity or catastrophe. What's the salary? She asked, because she needed to ground this conversation in something concrete before she started hyperventilating. Alexander named a number that made Emily's knees weak. It was more than triple what she made cleaning hotel rooms. It was enough to pay off her mother's remaining medical debt in 6 months. It was enough to move out of her walk-up apartment with the broken window. It was enough to stop choosing between electricity and groceries. That's too much, she said faintly. It's market rate for the position, Alexander said. Actually, it's slightly below market rate, but you'd be starting at an assistant level with clear paths to promotion. Emily's head spun. I need to think, she said. It's a lot. I need time to process. Of course, take whatever time you need, but Emily? She looked at him. Don't let fear make this decision for you, he said quietly. I've seen what fear does. It keeps brilliant people small. It wastes potential. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want, not just what feels safest. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. Patricia will walk you out, Alexander said. She'll give you my direct number. When you've made a decision, call me. Day or night, I'll answer. As if summoned, Patricia appeared in the doorway. Emily followed her out in a daze, accepting a business card with Alexander's contact information, mumbling something that might have been thank you. The elevator ride down felt faster than the ride up. The lobby seemed brighter. The street outside was exactly as she'd left it, but everything felt different. Emily walked 3 blocks before she had to sit down on a bench, legs shaking too badly to carry her further. She pulled out her phone and called Sarah. Well? Sarah answered immediately. How did it go? I've been dying here. He offered me a job, Emily said numbly. Silence. Then, say that again. He offered me a job, a real job, with benefits and a salary that, Sarah, it's more money than I've ever imagined making. Sarah's shriek was loud enough that Emily had to pull the phone away from her ear. Oh my God, Emily, this is incredible. Wait, why don't you sound happy? You sound terrified. Because I am terrified, Emily admitted. What if I can't do it? What if he's wrong about me? What if I fail spectacularly and end up worse off than I started? Or, Sarah said firmly, what if you don't fail? What if you're actually amazing at this? What if this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing? Emily closed her eyes, phone pressed to her ear, city noise swirling around her. I don't know how to be that person, she said quietly. The person who belongs in places like that. I'm a housekeeper, Sarah. That's all I've ever been. That's all you've let yourself be, Sarah corrected. But Emily, listen to me. You speak 6 languages. You taught yourself everything you know without help, without resources, without anyone believing in you. You stepped into a room yesterday and saved a deal worth millions of dollars. She paused. You're not a housekeeper who happens to speak Mandarin. You're a brilliant woman who's been cleaning toilets because that's the only opportunity anyone ever offered you, until now. Emily's eyes burned. What if I'm not enough? What if you are? The question hung in the air between them. Emily thought about her mother, working 3 jobs, bone-tired and invisible, never complaining. She thought about the promise she'd made at her mother's funeral, to make something of herself, to matter. She just never imagined it might actually be possible. I need to go to work, Emily said finally. I'm going to be late for my shift. You're seriously going back to the hotel? I haven't quit yet. I can't just not show up. Sarah sighed. You're insane. But okay. We'll talk tonight? Yeah, tonight. Emily hung up and sat for another minute, watching people stream past on their way to jobs and lives and futures that probably made sense to them. Then she stood, squared her shoulders, and headed for the red line. She had floors to clean. The Skyline Grand Hotel felt different when Emily walked through the employee entrance at 10:23 a.m. Or maybe she felt different, and the hotel was exactly the same. Mrs. Patterson was waiting near the time clock, arms crossed, expression suggesting she'd been counting the minutes of Emily's lateness. "Miss Carter, how nice of you to join us." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson. I had a personal appointment that ran long." "Personal appointments happen on personal time," Mrs. Patterson interrupted. "You're nearly 2 hours late. That's unacceptable." Emily nodded, accepting the reprimand because what else could she do? She couldn't exactly explain where she'd been, what she'd been offered, what she was trying desperately not to hope for. "It won't happen again," Emily said. "See that it doesn't. You're on floors 32 through 39 today. Make up your lost time, and we'll consider this your first and only warning." Emily changed into her uniform, grabbed her cart, and took the service elevator to 32. The work was familiar, mindless. Strip beds, wash bathrooms, vacuum carpets, dust surfaces. Room after room, exactly the same, distinguishable only by what personal items guests had scattered across identical furniture. But today, Emily's mind was elsewhere. She thought about Alexander's office, the view from 37 floors up, the offer that could change everything. She thought about her mother, and whether she'd be proud or horrified that Emily was even considering leaving steady employment for something uncertain. She thought about fear and safety and the difference between surviving and actually living. By 2 p.m., she'd finished floors 32 through 35 and was halfway through 36 when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Carter, this is Marcus Chen. Mr. Cole wanted me to check in and see if you had any questions about the offer. No pressure, just available if you need clarification on anything." Emily stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Thank you. I'm still thinking." The response was immediate. "Take all the time you need. We're here when you're ready." Emily slipped the phone back into her pocket and pushed her cart to the next room. But the text stayed with her, the kindness of it, the patience. Nobody had ever been patient with Emily before. Life had always been urgent, demanding, unforgiving of hesitation. She was scrubbing a bathtub on floor 38 when she heard voices in the hallway. Ridiculous, if you ask me. Cole's lost his mind. Emily froze, recognizing the voice. James, one of the hotel's junior managers. She'd cleaned his office before. "Hiring some random housekeeper?" Another voice, unfamiliar. "Yeah, that's definitely not going to end well." "She probably slept with him," James said, and both men laughed. Emily's hands tightened on her scrub brush. "I give it 2 weeks before he realizes his mistake and fires her. Then she'll be back to cleaning our toilets." "If they even take her back after she quits." The voices faded as they moved down the hallway. Emily stayed frozen in the bathroom, heart pounding with something hot and sharp. Shame? Anger? No. Determination. Because those men had looked at her and seen nothing. No potential, no value, no possibility that she might actually deserve the opportunity she'd been offered, just like everyone else had seen nothing for 26 years. Emily stood, rinsed out the bathtub, and pulled out her phone. She typed a message to Marcus. "I'd like to accept the position. When would Mr. Cole like me to start?" Her finger hovered over the send button. This was it. The moment where everything changed or stayed exactly the same. Emily thought about her mother's tired hands, about years of being invisible, about the little girl she'd been, promising herself she'd be more than the world expected. She pressed send. The response came 2 minutes later. "That's wonderful news. Mr. Cole would like to speak with you directly. Can you call him this evening?" Emily's heart raced, but this time it felt like excitement instead of fear. "Yes," she typed back. "I'll call at 6 p.m. She finished her shift in a blur of motion and adrenaline. The rooms blended together. Her hands moved through familiar motions while her mind spun with possibilities. At 5:30 p.m., she clocked out for the last time, though nobody except her knew that yet. Mrs. Patterson nodded curtly as Emily passed. "Better timing today." "Yes, ma'am." Emily walked through the employee exit and into the October evening, and with every step away from the Skyline Grand Hotel, she felt lighter. The Red Line home was crowded with rush-hour commuters. Emily stood near the door, holding the pole, feeling the sway and rattle of the train beneath her feet. A woman beside her was complaining into her phone about her boss. Two teenagers were laughing over something on a cracked screen. A tired-looking man in a suit was dozing upright, chin on his chest. Emily looked at all of them and wondered about their stories, their dreams, the opportunities they'd taken or let slip away. She wondered if any of them were standing at the edge of something life-changing, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Her stop came. She climbed the stairs, walked the familiar blocks, climbed the familiar stairs to her apartment. Sarah was home, pacing in the kitchen with barely contained energy. "Well," she demanded the instant Emily walked in. Emily set down her bag and smiled. "I accepted." Sarah's scream could probably be heard in 3 states. She grabbed Emily in a hug that lifted her off the ground, spinning in a circle, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "I'm so proud of you," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "Your mom would be so proud of you." Emily's throat tightened. "I hope so." They ordered Thai food to celebrate, the expensive kind with extra spring rolls, because tonight felt like a night for extravagance. While they waited for delivery, Emily sat on their lumpy couch and called the number on Alexander's business card. He answered on the second ring. "Emily, I'm glad you called." Just her name. Not Ms. Carter, like they were colleagues instead of billionaire and housekeeper. Former housekeeper, Emily corrected herself. "I wanted to accept your offer," she said, "if it's still available." "It absolutely is." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Welcome to the team. Can you start Monday?" Monday, 4 days away. 4 days to resign from the hotel, to prepare, to transform from invisible cleaner to whatever came next. "Yes," Emily said. "Monday works." "Excellent. Patricia will email you all the details, paperwork, orientation schedule, dress code information. And Emily?" "Yes?" "I'm very glad you said yes. I think you're going to do remarkable things here." After they hung up, Emily sat holding the phone, staring at nothing, trying to process the fact that her entire life had just changed direction. Sarah emerged from the kitchen with 2 glasses of cheap wine. "To new beginnings," she said, handing one to Emily. Emily clinked her glass against Sarah's. "To taking chances," she said. They drank, and for the first time in longer than Emily could remember, the future looked like something other than an endless repetition of the past. It looked like possibility. The next morning, Emily walked into the Skyline Grand Hotel for what would be one of the last times as an employee, and the building seemed to sense the difference in her. Or maybe she was just walking differently. Head up instead of down, shoulders back instead of hunched. Mrs. Patterson was at her usual post near the employee entrance, clipboard in hand, already frowning before Emily even reached her. "Miss Carter, a word, please." Emily followed her into the small office that always smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. Mrs. Patterson closed the door and turned, arms crossed. "I received a very interesting phone call yesterday evening," she said, "from someone claiming to be Alexander Cole's assistant, verifying your employment dates and performance record." Emily's stomach fluttered, but she kept her expression neutral. "Yes, ma'am. Care to explain why a billionaire's office is calling about a housekeeper's employment history?" There was no point in hiding it now. Emily straightened her spine and met Mrs. Patterson's eyes directly. "I've been offered a position at Mr. Cole's company. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice, effective today." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. "A position doing what exactly?" "Cultural liaison for their international division." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Then Mrs. Patterson laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You? A cultural liaison?" Emily felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make herself smaller, but something had shifted in the past 48 hours, something fundamental. "Yes, ma'am. Me." Mrs. Patterson's smile was thin and cold. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order, though I can't imagine what on earth qualified you for such a position. Must have been quite the impression you made." The implication hung in the air like spoiled meat. Emily's hands clenched at her sides, but her voice stayed steady. "I translated a critical business negotiation and saved Mr. Cole's company a significant partnership. He recognized value where others had overlooked it." She paused, letting that sink in. I'll work my 2 weeks if you need me to, or I can leave today. Your choice. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. Leave today. We'll mail your final paycheck. I don't need someone whose head is already out the door making mistakes on my floors. Fine. Emily turned toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I was a good employee. I showed up on time, did quality work, never complained. The fact that you can't see that says more about you than it does about me. She walked out before Mrs. Patterson could respond, went to her locker and emptied it of the few personal items she kept there. A photo of her mother, an extra pair of shoes, the romance novel she'd been reading on lunch breaks. Everything fit in her bag. Raj caught her in the hallway, eyes wide. Is it true? You're leaving? Word traveled fast in the hotel's staff network. It's true, Emily said. Why? Where are you going? Emily smiled and it felt real for the first time in years. Somewhere I can actually use my brain. Raj hugged her impulsively. Good for you, Em. Seriously. Get out of here and don't look back. Emily hugged him back, surprised by the sudden emotion. She'd worked alongside Raj for 3 years, and this 30-second conversation was the most meaningful interaction they'd ever had. How much of her life had she wasted being invisible? She left through the employee entrance one last time, and the October morning felt crisp and full of promise. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and mounting anxiety. Emily went shopping for work clothes, her first time buying something new instead of secondhand in longer than she could remember. Sarah came along, vetoing Emily's initial choices as too apologetic and steering her toward outfits that looked professional without looking like Emily was trying to disappear into the furniture. You're allowed to take up space now, Sarah said, holding up a deep blue blazer. Try this. Emily tried it. The blazer fit perfectly, made her look competent and put together, and cost more than she'd usually spend on groceries for a month. I can't afford— Yes, you can, Sarah interrupted. You just accepted a job that pays actual money. Invest in yourself. Emily bought the blazer, and 2 pairs of dress pants, and 3 blouses that didn't come from a thrift store clearance rack. Saturday evening, she sat at their tiny kitchen table with Sarah and made lists. Things she needed to learn, things she needed to research, things that terrified her. The last list was longest. What if I don't know how to act in meetings? Emily asked, pen hovering over paper. What if I use the wrong fork at business lunches? What if I accidentally offend someone important? Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she was designing a logo for a new client. Then you'll learn. You'll adapt. You've been adapting your whole life, Em. This is just a different context. But the stakes are so much higher. So is the reward, Sarah pointed out. Look, you're going to make mistakes. Everyone does, especially at first. But you know what? You'll survive them. You've survived worse. Emily thought about her mother's funeral, about dropping out of Northwestern, about years of work that left her exhausted and invisible and wondering if this was all life would ever offer. Sarah was right. She'd survived worse. Sunday. Emily did something she hadn't done in months. She went to the library. Not the small branch near her apartment, but the Harold Washington Library downtown, with its soaring ceilings and endless rows of books and quiet spaces where knowledge lived and breathed. She found the business section and started reading. Corporate culture, office politics, professional communication strategies. She absorbed information like a sponge, taking notes in the small notebook she always carried, building frameworks for understanding this new world she was about to enter. A woman at the next table glanced over at her notes, written in a mix of English, Mandarin characters, and Spanish, and did a double take. Emily met her eyes and smiled slightly. The woman smiled back and returned to her own work. Such a small interaction, but it felt significant somehow. Like Emily was becoming visible in a new way, not as someone to overlook, but as someone interesting, someone worth noticing. She left the library as it was closing, arms full of borrowed books, head full of new concepts, and walked to the Red Line feeling more prepared than she had any right to feel. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of dawn. Emily woke at 5 a.m., too anxious to sleep longer. She showered, dried her hair with actual care instead of just letting it air dry, and put on her new blue blazer with black pants and a white blouse. The mirror showed someone she barely recognized. Professional, put together, almost confident. Sarah emerged from her bedroom, bleary-eyed, just as Emily was about to leave. You look amazing, Sarah said. I look terrified. You look like someone about to do something brave. Sarah hugged her tightly. Go be brilliant. Text me updates. And Emily? Yeah? Remember that they chose you. They want you there. You're not sneaking into someplace you don't belong. You were invited. Emily held on to those words as she rode the red line downtown, as she walked through the revolving doors of the Cole building, as she stepped into the elevator and pressed 37. The doors opened onto the same reception area she'd seen last Monday, but this time Vanessa greeted her with genuine warmth. Welcome to your first day. Patricia is waiting to get you started with orientation. Patricia appeared almost immediately, smiling. Good morning, Emily. Ready to jump in? No, absolutely not. Emily was ready to run screaming back to the safety of cleaning hotel rooms. Ready, she said instead. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind. Paperwork, ID badge, computer login credentials. A tour of the office that left Emily's head spinning with names and departments and the locations of supply closets she'd hopefully never need. Her office was small but real. Actual walls, actual door, actual window with an actual view of the city below. A desk with a computer. A chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. This is mine? Emily asked, unable to quite believe it. Patricia smiled. This is yours. Take a few minutes to settle in. I'll be back at 10 to introduce you to the team you'll be working with. When Patricia left, Emily stood in the center of her new office and slowly turned in a circle. Her office. Her desk. Her computer. Her chance. She sat down carefully in the expensive chair, ran her fingers over the clean desk surface, and felt tears prick at her eyes. 3 years ago, she'd been sitting in a funeral home, listening to the minister talk about her mother's life, wondering how she'd survive the next day, let alone the next year. Now she was here. Emily pulled out her phone and took a photo of the view from her window. She sent it to the contact labeled Mom's Phone, a number long since disconnected, but Emily had never been able to delete it. The message wouldn't send, of course, but writing it felt important anyway. I made it, Mom. I don't know how, but I made it. A knock on the door pulled her back. Patricia returned with 3 people in tow. Emily, meet your team. This is Jennifer Torres, senior consultant. The woman Emily recognized from the hotel meeting smiled and extended a hand. Marcus Chen, head of operations. Marcus gave her a small wave. And David Kim, junior analyst. David looked nervous, which somehow made Emily feel slightly better. We're excited to have you, Jennifer said, and she sounded like she meant it. Alexander told us about your translation work. That was seriously impressive. Thank you, Emily managed. I'm excited to be here, though I'll admit I'm also terrified. Marcus laughed. Good. Fear means you care. Let me show you to the conference room. We have a team meeting in 5 minutes. The conference room had the same floor-to-ceiling windows as Alexander's office. 10 people were already seated around a massive table, laptops open, coffee cups steaming. Emily took a seat near the end, trying to make herself small out of habit, but Jennifer gestured to a chair closer to the head of the table. Cultural liaisons sit here. You're part of the core team now. Emily moved, hyper-aware of eyes tracking her movement. At exactly 10 a.m., Alexander walked in. The room's energy shifted immediately. Not fear, exactly, but focused attention. This was a man people respected. His eyes found Emily's almost immediately. He nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and encouragement. Morning, everyone. Let's dive in. Marcus, where are we on the Shanghai contract? The meeting moved fast. People spoke in acronyms Emily didn't know, referenced projects she'd never heard of, threw around numbers that made her head spin. She took notes furiously, trying to absorb context, but it was like learning a new language through immersion, overwhelming and disorienting. Then Alexander said, We're finalizing terms with Chen's team next Tuesday. Emily, you'll be on that call. Every eye in the room turned to her. Emily's mouth went dry. Of course. They're sending over updated contract language today. I'd like you to review it, flag any cultural concerns or phrasing that might not translate well. Can you have notes to Jennifer by Thursday? Could she? She had no idea. She'd never reviewed a business contract in her life. Yes, Emily heard herself say. Alexander smiled slightly. Good. Jennifer will get you up to speed on context. The meeting continued, but Emily barely heard the rest. Her mind was racing, already dreading the moment she'd have to admit she was in over her head. When the meeting ended, people dispersed quickly. Emily was gathering her notes when Jennifer appeared beside her. "Walk with me?" They went to Jennifer's office, larger than Emily's, decorated with family photos and framed degrees from impressive universities. Jennifer gestured to a chair and sat across from her, not behind her desk. Colleague to colleague, not boss to subordinate. "How are you really feeling?" Jennifer asked. Emily considered lying, then decided against it. Completely overwhelmed, "I understood maybe 30% of what was discussed in there." Jennifer nodded. "That's actually better than most people on their first day. You'll pick it up fast. I can tell you're good at absorbing information." She pulled out a folder and handed it to Emily. "This is everything you need to know about the Shanghai project. Background, key players, cultural considerations we've already identified. Read through it today, and we'll meet tomorrow morning to discuss." By Thursday, you'll have enough context to review the contract language. Emily took the folder like it was precious cargo. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I'm about to pile a lot of work on you." Jennifer smiled. "But I think you can handle it. Alexander doesn't make hiring mistakes." Over the next few days, Emily discovered that a lot of work was a dramatic understatement. She read until her eyes burned, attended meetings where she understood incrementally more each time, asked questions until she was sure people were sick of hearing her voice. But slowly, pieces started connecting. The Shanghai project was a partnership to manufacture and distribute tech components throughout Asia. Chen's company had the infrastructure and market presence. Alexander's company had the technology and innovation. Together, they could dominate the market. Apart, they were vulnerable to competitors. The stakes were exactly as high as Emily had feared. Wednesday evening, she was still at her desk at 7 p.m., reviewing contract language for the 15th time, when Alexander appeared in her doorway. "You're still here?" Emily looked up, startled. The office had emptied hours ago. She hadn't noticed. "Just finishing these notes," she said. Alexander walked in, hands in pockets, studying the papers spread across her desk. "Find anything concerning?" "Actually, yes." Emily pulled out a page covered in her handwriting, notes in 3 languages. "This clause about intellectual property rights is phrased in a way that might be interpreted as disrespectful in Chinese business culture. It implies distrust." She showed him the section, explained the nuance, suggested alternative phrasing that accomplished the same legal protection without the cultural offense. Alexander listened carefully, asked pointed questions, nodded slowly. "You're right," he said finally. "Good catch. Make those notes to Jennifer and copy me on the email." "Will do." He turned to leave, then paused. "Emily, it's 7 p.m. Go home. The contract will still be here tomorrow. I just want to make sure you're sure." His voice was firm but kind. "You've done excellent work this week, but burning yourself out in the first 5 days doesn't help anyone. Trust yourself enough to rest." After he left, Emily sat for another minute staring at her notes. Then she packed up her bag and left, feeling something unfamiliar. Pride, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of doing work that mattered. Thursday's meeting with Jennifer went better than Emily had hoped. Her notes were thorough, insightful, exactly what was needed. "This is really good work," Jennifer said, reviewing Emily's suggestions. "I'm forwarding this to legal and copying Alexander. You just saved us from a potentially awkward negotiation moment." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. Stop thanking me for doing your job well." Jennifer smiled. "You earned this. Own it." Owning it was harder than it sounded. Emily still felt like an imposter every time she sat in meetings, still second-guessed every comment before speaking, still fought the urge to apologize for taking up space. But she was learning. Friday afternoon, Marcus stopped by her office with coffee and a conspiratorial grin. "Congratulations, you survived your first week without running away screaming." Emily accepted the coffee gratefully. "Is that the metric for success?" "Around here?" "Absolutely." Marcus settled into the chair across from her desk. "Seriously, though, you're doing great. The team's impressed." "I barely know what I'm doing." "Welcome to corporate America. None of us do." He sipped his coffee. "The difference is you're asking questions and learning fast. That matters more than pretending you already know everything." After he left, Emily sat back in her chair and looked around her small office. 1 week ago, she'd been scrubbing toilets. Today, she'd helped refine contract language for a multi-million-dollar international deal. The distance between those two realities felt impossible. But it was real. This was real. Emily pulled out her phone and texted Sarah. "Survived week 1. They haven't fired me yet." Sarah's response was immediate. "Told you, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Emily stared at that message for a long moment. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe this was where she was supposed to be all along. The weekend felt different this time. Not anxious preparation, but genuine rest. Emily slept late Saturday, had brunch with Sarah at a cafe they usually couldn't afford, and spent the afternoon reading for pleasure instead of frantic learning. Sunday, she did laundry and meal prep and caught up on errands, but her mind kept drifting back to work. Not with dread, with anticipation. She'd sat in meetings this week and understood the conversations. She'd contributed ideas that people actually considered. She'd done work that mattered, that would affect real outcomes in the real world. And Tuesday, she'd be translating for the call with Chen's team again. But this time as an official part of the negotiation, not a housekeeper who'd accidentally wandered into something beyond her scope. Monday of her second week, Emily arrived at the office to find an email from Alexander marked high priority. The subject line read, "Shanghai Call Preparation." Her stomach fluttered as she opened it. "Emily, Tuesday's call is critical. Chen's team will be pressing on several contract points where cultural sensitivity is paramount. I need you confident and prepared. Let's meet today at 2 p.m. to review strategy. AC." Emily read the email 3 times, then checked her calendar to make sure she hadn't missed anything. 2 p.m. was clear. She spent the morning reviewing everything she could find about the negotiation points Alexander mentioned. By the time 2 o'clock arrived, her notebook was full of observations, potential concerns, suggested approaches. Patricia waved her into Alexander's office when she arrived. He was on the phone but gestured for her to sit. Emily settled into the chair across from his desk, trying not to fidget. "Understood. Keep me posted." Alexander hung up and turned his full attention to her. "Thanks for coming. How are you feeling about tomorrow?" "Nervous," Emily admitted, "but prepared." "Good. Nervous means you care." He pulled up a document on his computer. "Walk me through the cultural considerations you've identified." For the next hour, they strategized. Emily explained the significance of certain phrases in Mandarin business culture. Alexander explained the company's bottom lines and negotiation boundaries. Together, they built a framework for navigating the call that honored both business necessity and cultural respect. "What about this clause?" Alexander pointed to a section about quality control standards. Emily read it carefully, translating in her head. "The phrasing is too aggressive. It reads like you're assuming they'll deliver substandard work. In Chinese business culture, that's a serious insult. It questions their integrity." "But we need quality guarantees." "Absolutely. But phrase it as partnership standards we both commit to, not policing their work. Something like..." Emily thought for a moment, then wrote out a suggestion in both English and Mandarin. Alexander read it, nodded slowly. "That's perfect. It says the same thing without the offense." They continued through the contract point by point. Alexander asked sharp questions. Emily provided cultural context and alternative approaches. The conversation flowed naturally, professionally. Emily realized, somewhere in the middle of explaining the significance of indirect communication in Chinese business culture, that she wasn't nervous anymore. She was in her element. When they finished, Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying her with that same intense focus he'd had in the hotel lounge 2 weeks ago. "You have a gift for this," he said simply. Emily felt her cheeks warm. "I just pay attention. Don't diminish it. Most people go through their entire careers without learning to pay attention properly." He paused. "You're going to do very well here, Emily. Better than well." Before she could respond, his desk phone buzzed. Patricia's voice came through the speaker. "Sir, Lily's school is on line 2. They said it's urgent." Alexander's expression shifted immediately, professional mask dropping to reveal genuine concern. "Excuse me, I need to take this." Emily stood quickly. "Of course. She was at the door when she heard him answer. "This is Alexander Cole. Is everything all right?" Emily closed the door behind her, giving him privacy, but she couldn't help the small pang of curiosity. Lily, the little girl from the photo in his office, his daughter. Emily had almost forgotten that Alexander Cole, billionaire CEO, master negotiator, was also a single father. She wondered what that was like, balancing both worlds. Back in her office, Emily spent the rest of the afternoon refining her notes for tomorrow's call. She practiced potential translations aloud, making sure her phrasing honored the nuances she'd discussed with Alexander. At 5:30 p.m., her phone rang. Alexander's name on the caller ID. Hello? Emily, I need a favor. He sounded stressed in a way she'd never heard before. My daughter's school just called. She's sick, fever, possibly flu, and I need to pick her up immediately. The problem is, I have the call with our London office in 20 minutes that I absolutely cannot miss. Emily's mind raced. What do you need me to do? Could you possibly pick up Lily from school? The nurse knows I'm sending someone, and I've cleared you with the office. I know this isn't in your job description, and you're completely within your rights to say no. Of course I'll go, Emily interrupted. Just text me the address. The relief in his voice was palpable. Thank you. Truly. I'll get there as soon as I can. Probably an hour, maybe 90 minutes. Take your time. She'll be fine. Emily grabbed her bag and headed out, mind already shifting gears from contract negotiations to sick child management. The school was 20 minutes away in light traffic. Emily found visitor parking and made her way to the main office, where a tired-looking nurse greeted her. You must be Ms. Carter. Lily's in the nurse's station. Poor thing has a fever of 101. We've called her father. He sent me. He's handling an urgent work matter, but will be here soon. The nurse led her to a small room where a little girl lay on a cot, clutching a stuffed elephant, looking miserable. This was Lily. The gap-toothed smile from Alexander's office photo, currently wan and feverish. Hi, Lily, Emily said gently, crouching beside the cot. I'm Emily. Your dad asked me to come get you while he finishes up at work. Lily's eyes, the same sharp intelligence as her father's, studied Emily suspiciously. I don't know you. That's smart. You shouldn't go with strangers. Emily pulled out her phone, showing Lily the text thread with Alexander. Your dad texted me your school's address and told me you have a purple elephant named Mr. Snuggles. Lily clutched the elephant tighter. How did you know that? Your dad told me. He wanted you to know it's okay to come with me. Lily considered this, fever-bright eyes assessing Emily with surprising shrewdness for a 7-year-old. Okay, she said finally, but if you're a kidnapper, Daddy will find you. Emily suppressed a smile. I have no doubt. The nurse helped Emily gather Lily's things, backpack, jacket, Mr. Snuggles, and walk them out to Emily's beat-up Honda Civic. Your car is small, Lily observed as Emily helped her into the back seat. It is, Emily agreed, but it runs, which is what matters. But Daddy's car is big and black and has special seats. I bet it's very nice. Lily leaned her head against Mr. Snuggles, looking pale and exhausted. I don't feel good. I know, sweetheart. We're going to get you home and comfortable, okay? Where's Daddy? He's finishing something very important at work, but he'll be home very soon. Emily pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the address Alexander had texted, an upscale residential area north of downtown that made her apartment look like a cardboard box by comparison. Traffic was heavier now, rush hour building. Lily dozed fitfully in the back seat, waking occasionally to ask questions. What's your name again? Emily. Why did Daddy send you? Because I work with him and he needed help. Do you like him? Emily glanced in the rearview mirror. Your dad? Yeah, lots of people like Daddy because he's rich. Mrs. Morrison says that's not a good reason to like someone. Mrs. Morrison was apparently full of wisdom. I like your dad because he's smart and kind, Emily said honestly. The money has nothing to do with it. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. They reached Alexander's house, a beautiful modern structure with clean lines and large windows, set back from the street behind a security gate. Emily punched in the code Alexander had texted and drove through. The garage door opened automatically. Emily helped Lily out of the car and into the house, following the little girl's feverish directions to her bedroom upstairs. Lily's room was exactly what Emily would have imagined. Books everywhere, art supplies scattered across a desk, walls decorated with her own drawings and posters of planets and animals. Can you help me change into pajamas? Lily asked, swaying slightly with exhaustion. Emily helped her into soft pajamas covered in stars, got her settled in bed with Mr. Snuggles, and found a thermometer in the bathroom. 101.3. Not dangerous, but definitely uncomfortable. I'm going to get you some water and check if you need medicine, okay? I'll be right back. Downstairs, Emily found a kitchen that looked like something from a design magazine, all stainless steel and white marble. She filled a glass with water, found children's fever reducer in a cabinet clearly organized for exactly this kind of emergency, and brought both upstairs. Lily took the medicine without complaint and sipped the water. "Will you stay until Daddy gets home?" she asked, voice small and worried. "Of course," Emily said. "I'm not going anywhere. Can you read to me?" Emily looked at the bookshelf beside Lily's bed. Chapter books, picture books, science books about space and animals. "What would you like to hear?" Lily pulled out a well-worn copy of a book about a girl who travels through time. "This one. Daddy and I are reading it together, but he won't mind if you read some." Emily settled into the chair beside Lily's bed and began to read. She made it through 3 chapters before Lily's breathing evened out into sleep. Emily closed the book quietly and sat watching the little girl for a moment. Lily looked so much like her father. Same sharp features, same intelligent eyes, even the same slight furrow between her eyebrows. But there was a gentleness to her, too, a vulnerability that Alexander kept carefully hidden. Emily pulled out her phone and texted Alexander. "Lily's asleep, fever's 101.3, gave her medicine. She's okay." The response came immediately. "Thank you. On my way. 20 minutes out." Emily made her way back downstairs and waited in the living room, feeling like an intruder in this beautiful space full of evidence of the lives lived here. Photos on the mantel showed Lily at various ages, baby, toddler, gap-toothed first grader, and in the older photos, a woman with kind eyes and Lily's smile, the mother who was no longer here. Emily understood that particular absence better than most. The garage door opened exactly 19 minutes later. Alexander rushed in, still in his suit, tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled. "How is she?" "Sleeping. Fever's down slightly from the medicine. She was a trooper." The tension in Alexander's shoulders eased fractionally. "Thank you. For this. I know it was above and beyond." "It wasn't," Emily interrupted gently. "Your daughter needed help. I was happy to provide it." Alexander nodded, throat working like he was swallowing difficult words. "I'm going to check on her." "Of course." He disappeared upstairs. Emily gathered her things, preparing to leave, when Alexander returned a few minutes later. "She's sleeping soundly. You got her favorite pajamas on and everything." He smiled slightly. "The star ones." She picked them out. Alexander walked to the kitchen, pulling out a bottle of water and offering one to Emily. She accepted, and they stood in his expensive kitchen drinking water in tired silence. "Her mother used to handle this," Alexander said quietly. "School pickups, sick days, all of it. I was always working, always traveling, always convinced the next deal was more important than being present." Emily didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "After Sarah died," he continued, "I had to learn everything fast. Medicine dosages, favorite bedtime stories, which pajamas were acceptable on which days. Being present became non-negotiable." He looked at Emily directly. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. When I hired you, it wasn't charity. It wasn't a kind gesture. It was business. You had skills I needed." Emily nodded. "But today?" Alexander's expression softened. "Today you helped my daughter when I couldn't be there. That's not something I take lightly. Thank you." "You're welcome," Emily said simply. She left shortly after, driving home through evening traffic with her mind full of new understanding. Alexander Cole wasn't just a billionaire CEO. He was a father doing his best, a man who'd lost someone important and was figuring out how to keep going, just like Emily. Maybe that's why he'd seen her when others hadn't. Maybe it took someone who'd survived loss to recognize survival in someone else. The next morning, Emily arrived early to prepare for the Shanghai call, but Alexander was already in the conference room when she got there. "Morning," he said. "Lily wanted me to tell you thank you for yesterday. She said you're nice and you read with good expression." Emily smiled. "High praise from a 7-year-old. "The highest." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Ready for this?" Emily sat down, opening her notebook to the pages of careful preparation. Ready. The call started at 9 a.m. sharp. Mr. Chen's team joined from Shanghai, voices crackling slightly over the connection. And for the next 2 hours, Emily did what she was born to do. She translated, yes. But more than that, she bridged worlds. She caught subtle meanings and rephrased them for clarity. She navigated cultural nuances that could have derailed negotiations. She turned potential conflicts into opportunities for understanding. When it was over, contracts were agreed upon in principle, with formal signing scheduled for the following month. Mr. Chen's final words in Mandarin were directed at Emily. Miss Carter, your skill brings honor to this partnership. We look forward to working with you. After the call disconnected, the conference room erupted in relieved conversation. Alexander looked at Emily and said simply, "Brilliant work." And Emily finally believed it might be true. The weeks that followed the successful Shanghai call blurred together in a cascade of meetings, translations, and late nights at the office. Emily found herself becoming something she'd never imagined. Essential. Not just useful, not just convenient. Essential. The Shanghai contract progressed smoothly, but it opened doors to other opportunities. A potential partnership in Seoul, expansion discussions with a manufacturing firm in Taipei. Every new venture required Emily's cultural expertise, her linguistic precision, her ability to navigate the invisible currents that could make or break international relationships. She was no longer the woman who cleaned floors. She was the woman who built bridges. But success, Emily discovered, came with complications she hadn't anticipated. 3 weeks after the Shanghai call, she was working late in her office when Jennifer knocked on the open door. Got a minute? Emily looked up from the contract she'd been reviewing, blinking away the eye strain from too many hours staring at screens. Of course. Jennifer came in and closed the door behind her, a gesture that immediately put Emily on alert. Closed-door conversations meant something serious. I wanted to give you a heads up, Jennifer said, settling into the chair across from Emily's desk. There's been some talk about your rapid promotion. Emily's stomach tightened. What kind of talk? The predictable kind, unfortunately. Jennifer's expression was sympathetic but direct. Some people are questioning how you went from hotel housekeeping to a consulting position in a matter of days. There are implications being made about why Alexander hired you. The implications didn't need to be spelled out. Emily had heard similar whispers in the break room, had felt the weight of speculative stares in meetings. I see, Emily said quietly. For what it's worth, everyone who actually works with you knows those implications are garbage, Jennifer continued. Your work speaks for itself. You've contributed more in 3 weeks than some people do in 3 years. But optics matter in corporate environments, and the optics of a young woman with no formal credentials being personally hired by the CEO. Jennifer trailed off meaningfully. Emily felt old shame trying to resurface, the familiar weight of not being enough, of being judged for circumstances beyond her control. But something had changed in the past few weeks. She'd proven herself too many times to let gossip diminish what she'd earned. What do you suggest? Emily asked, keeping her voice level. Document everything. Keep meticulous records of your contributions. Let your work be undeniable. Jennifer paused. And maybe avoid situations that could be misinterpreted, like one-on-one late-night meetings with Alexander. Emily glanced at her clock. 7:47 p.m. Alexander was still in his office. She'd seen his light on when she'd gone to the break room earlier. We're working on the Seoul presentation, Emily said. It's due Friday. I know, and I'm not saying you shouldn't work together. Just be aware that people are watching. They're waiting for something to validate their assumptions. After Jennifer left, Emily sat in the silence of her office, anger and frustration warring with pragmatic understanding. She'd been naive to think that proving herself would be enough. In corporate America, perception often mattered more than performance, but knowing that didn't make it less infuriating. Her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. Still here? Need your eyes on the Seoul market analysis when you have a moment. Emily stared at this message, Jennifer's warning echoing in her head. Then she stood, grabbed her notebook, and walked to Alexander's office anyway. Because letting gossip dictate her work felt like another kind of invisibility, and she was done being invisible. Alexander looked up when she knocked, surprise crossing his face. I thought you'd gone home. Still finishing things up. Emily entered, leaving the door open behind her, a small concession to Jennifer's advice. You wanted me to review something? They worked for the next hour, reviewing market data and cultural considerations for the Seoul expansion. It was professional, productive, exactly what colleagues working on a critical project should be doing. But Emily couldn't shake the awareness that someone might walk by, might see them, might add this to their catalog of evidence for whatever story they were constructing. You're distracted, Alexander observed. Everything okay? Emily hesitated, then decided honesty was simpler than evasion. Jennifer told me there's been talk about how I got hired, about implications. Alexander's expression hardened. What kind of implications? The kind you can probably guess. He sat back in his chair, jaw tight. Give me names. I'll address it directly. That would make it worse, Emily said. It would look like you're protecting me, which would just validate what people are already thinking. So what do you suggest? I keep doing excellent work. I let my results speak louder than their speculation, and I don't give them anything real to point to. Alexander studied her for a long moment. This isn't fair. You shouldn't have to prove yourself more than anyone else just because of how you came to work here. Fair doesn't matter, Emily said. Reality does. She wasn't angry at him. This wasn't his fault. But she was angry at the situation, at the automatic assumption that a woman's success must be connected to something other than her own merit. For what it's worth, Alexander said quietly, I knew this would happen when I hired you. I knew people would talk, would make assumptions. I hired you anyway because you were the best person for the job. That hasn't changed. I know, Emily said, and I appreciate it, but I also need to be smart about navigating this. She closed her notebook and stood. I should go. It's late, and I have an early meeting tomorrow. Emily, I'm fine, she said, and managed a small smile. Really, just adjusting to corporate politics. Walking to her car through the empty parking garage, Emily felt the weight of every assumption, every whispered speculation, every judgment from people who'd never bothered to know her story. But she also felt the weight of her work, the contracts she'd helped finalize, the partnerships she'd facilitated, the value she'd created. They could think what they wanted. She knew what she'd earned. The Seoul project consumed the next 2 weeks. Emily worked with a team of analysts and consultants, providing cultural context for everything from marketing strategies to negotiation protocols. She was careful now, conscious of optics in a way that felt exhausting but necessary. She scheduled meetings in conference rooms instead of offices. She copied multiple people on emails. She documented every contribution meticulously. It was armor made of paper trails. The presentation was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Emily had prepared extensively, coordinating with the team to ensure every cultural nuance was addressed, every potential miscommunication anticipated. The meeting room was packed. Senior leadership, the Seoul team via video conference, various department heads and stakeholders. Alexander opened the presentation, then turned it over to Jennifer to cover the business strategy. When it came time for the cultural analysis section, Jennifer nodded to Emily. Emily Carter, our cultural liaison, will walk us through the market-specific considerations. Emily stood, clicked to her first slide, and began. She'd given presentations before, in college, in the single semester she'd attended. But this was different. These were executives who controlled budgets larger than small countries. Making a mistake here could cost millions. She didn't make mistakes. For 20 minutes, Emily walked the room through Korean business culture, the importance of hierarchy, the significance of relationship building, the cultural context that would affect everything from packaging design to negotiation timelines. She spoke clearly, confidently, backing every point with research and real-world examples. When she finished, the Seoul team's leader, a man named Park Jin-woo, unmuted himself. Miss Carter, that was an exceptional analysis. You clearly understand not just our language, but our business culture. I'm impressed. Around the table, Emily saw expressions shift, respect replacing skepticism, interest replacing dismissal. Alexander caught her eye and nodded slightly. The meeting continued for another hour, but the momentum had shifted. The Seoul team was engaged, asking questions, moving toward partnership instead of hesitation. By the time the call ended, there was general agreement to move forward with the expansion. Jennifer pulled Emily aside as people filed out of the conference room. That was masterful. You just made yourself indispensable. I just did my job, Emily said. Exactly. And you did it so well that nobody can question why you're here anymore. That evening, Emily got home to find Sarah waiting with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. Celebrating, Sarah announced, because my roommate is officially a badass corporate consultant who just nailed a presentation that's going to result in how much was the Seoul deal worth again? Potentially $200 million over 3 years, Emily said, still slightly awed by the numbers. $200 million. Sarah poured wine into mismatched glasses. And they said you should stick to cleaning toilets. Nobody said that exactly. They thought it. Same thing. Sarah raised her glass. To proving everyone wrong. Emily clinked her glass against Sarah's and drank, letting the wine warm her from the inside. It's getting easier, she said after a moment. The imposter syndrome is fading. I actually feel like I belong there now. Because you do belong there. You always did. The world just needed to catch up. That weekend, Emily did something she hadn't done in months. She went back to visit the Skyline Grand Hotel, not as an employee, as a guest. She walked through the lobby in her professional clothes, carrying herself differently than she had when she'd pushed a cleaning cart through these same halls. The front desk clerk smiled automatically, the practiced welcome reserved for paying guests. Checking in? No, just meeting someone for coffee. Emily walked to the hotel cafe and ordered an expensive latte she would have considered wasteful a month ago. She sat near the window, watching the flow of guests and staff, seeing the space from an entirely new perspective. Raj appeared after a few minutes, still in his housekeeping uniform, eyes widening when he saw her. Emily, you look... Wow, this is weird seeing you here as a guest. Emily laughed. Feels weird too. Sit if you have a break. Raj settled into the chair across from her, looking around nervously like someone might scold him for sitting with a hotel guest. So? How's the fancy job? Exhausting, challenging, amazing, Emily smiled. I'm learning so much it makes my head spin sometimes. That's incredible. I'm happy for you. Really. There was something wistful in his expression, and Emily recognized it, the look of someone still waiting for their opportunity. How are things here? She asked. Raj shrugged, same as always. Patterson's still miserable. James still thinks he's destined for greatness. The bathrooms still need scrubbing. You ever think about doing something else? All the time, Raj admitted. But I don't have skills like yours. I barely finished high school. What else am I qualified for? Emily thought about that question, about how many people trap themselves with it. What do you like doing? She asked. Outside of work? I don't know. Photography, I guess? I take pictures on my phone, post them sometimes. People seem to like them. Show me. Raj pulled out his phone, hesitant at first, then warming up as he scrolled through his photos. They were good, really good. Candid shots of Chicago, interesting angles, genuine artistic vision. These are beautiful, Emily said honestly. They're just phone pictures. They're art. Emily looked at him directly. You should take a photography class, build a portfolio. There are free courses online, equipment you can rent. You have talent, Raj. You just need to develop it. He looked skeptical but hopeful. You really think so? I know so. I taught myself Mandarin with library books and free audio files. You can teach yourself photography. After Raj left to finish his shift, Emily sat in the cafe a while longer, thinking about how many talented people were invisible simply because nobody had looked. She thought about her mother, who'd been intelligent and hardworking but never got the chance to be anything beyond a housekeeper. She thought about everyone still pushing carts and scrubbing floors, carrying skills and dreams nobody asked about. And she thought about what she could do with the platform she was building. Monday morning, Emily walked into Alexander's office with a proposal she'd spent the weekend developing. Do you have a few minutes? She asked. I have an idea I'd like to run by you. Alexander gestured for her to sit. I'm listening. The company has a community outreach program, right? Charitable initiatives, educational partnerships, that sort of thing? We do. Why? Emily opened her notebook, showing him the outline she'd prepared. I want to propose a workforce development program. We partner with hotels, restaurants, service industries, places where talented people are often overlooked. We identify employees with skills in languages, cultural knowledge, technical abilities they've developed on their own time. She continued, gaining momentum. We offer training, mentorship, potential employment pathways, not charity, actual opportunities based on merit and potential. Alexander leaned back, studying her proposal. You want to find more people like you. I want to make sure talent doesn't stay invisible just because someone doesn't have the right credentials or connections. He read through her notes carefully, asking pointed questions about implementation, costs, potential outcomes. Finally, he nodded. This is good. Really good. Put together a formal proposal, budget projections, partnership structures, success metrics. Present it to the board next month. Emily's heart raced. The board? You'll need their approval for funding. And Emily? He smiled slightly. This is exactly the kind of initiative they look for. It's smart business and good ethics. They'll love it. Over the next 3 weeks, Emily developed her proposal with the same meticulous attention she brought to everything else. She researched similar programs, built financial models, identified potential partner organizations. Jennifer helped with the business case. Marcus contributed operational logistics. Even David, the junior analyst who'd been so quiet during Emily's first days, offered to help with the data analysis. The team that had once been strangers became collaborators. Colleagues became something closer to friends. And Emily, who'd spent years working alone, discovered the unexpected joy of working together. The night before the board presentation, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through her talking points for the 100th time. Her phone buzzed around 11 p.m. A text from Alexander. Stop rehearsing. You're ready. Trust yourself. Emily smiled in the darkness. She'd never told him she was still awake, still preparing, but somehow he knew. She typed back, How do you know I'm rehearsing? The response came immediately. Because it's what I would be doing. But you don't need to. Your proposal is solid. Your passion is clear. The board will see what I saw, someone who notices what others miss and does something about it. Emily read that message 3 times before responding, Thank you for all of this, for seeing me. You made yourself visible, Emily. I just paid attention. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room on the executive floor, a space Emily had never entered before. She arrived 15 minutes early, wearing her best suit, carrying her laptop and notes, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. The room was intimidating. Massive table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows with views that made her office window look modest. Board members filtered in gradually. Older men in expensive suits, a few women who carried themselves with the assurance of people accustomed to power. Faces Emily recognized from the company website. Alexander entered last, taking his seat at the head of the table. He caught Emily's eye and nodded slightly. Good afternoon, everyone, he began. Thank you for making time for this special session. Today we're hearing a proposal for a new workforce development initiative. Emily Carter, our cultural liaison, has developed a program I believe warrants serious consideration. He gestured to Emily. The floor is yours. Emily stood, clicked to her first slide, and began to speak. She told them about talent hiding in plain sight, about people with skills nobody asked about, working jobs that didn't use half their potential, about the business case for finding and developing that talent, not just for philanthropic reasons, but because it was smart, because it would give the company access to perspectives and abilities they were currently missing. She showed them the numbers, projected costs, potential ROI, partnership opportunities. She outlined implementation strategies, success metrics, pilot program structures, and she told them her own story, not for sympathy, but as proof of concept, as evidence that her program could work because it had already worked, accidentally, with her. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then a woman at the far end of the table, Eleanor Hartwick, the board's vice chair, spoke up. This is the most innovative workforce development proposal I've seen in 20 years of board service. The business case is sound. The social impact is significant. And the fact that you're living proof of the concept adds credibility that can't be manufactured. She looked around the table. I move that we approve funding for a 2-year pilot program with the budget allocation Ms. Carter has proposed. Seconded, another board member said immediately. Discussion followed, questions about logistics, concerns about scaling, suggestions for modifications. But the overall tone was positive, engaged, genuinely interested. 45 minutes later, the vote was called. The program was approved unanimously. Emily walked out of that conference room in a daze, barely processing what had just happened. She'd gone in hoping for consideration, maybe a smaller pilot program. She'd left with full approval and funding for her vision. Alexander caught up with her in the hallway. "Congratulations, that was exceptional. I can't believe they approved it." "I can. It was brilliant." He paused. "This is going to change lives, Emily. You know that, right? Not just the people who go through the program, but their families, their communities. You're creating opportunities where none existed before." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back. "My mother would have loved this. She always said people just needed chances." "Then this is a good way to honor her memory." That evening, Emily sat in her small office, which somehow felt less small now, and drafted an email to Raj with information about free photography courses and portfolio building resources. She thought about all the other Rajs out there, all the talented people waiting for someone to notice. She was going to notice them. She was going to help them become visible. 2 months after the board presentation, the Workforce Development Program officially launched. Emily split her time between her cultural liaison work and developing the new initiative, and somehow both roles fed into each other. The program's first cohort included 12 participants from hotels, restaurants, and retail positions across Chicago. They brought skills in languages, technical abilities, customer service excellence that translated to client management. Emily interviewed each candidate personally, seeing herself in their nervous hope, their desperate desire to be more than circumstances had allowed. One of them was a young woman named Maria, who spoke fluent Spanish and Portuguese and was working as a hotel front desk clerk despite having skills that could serve the company's Latin American expansion. Another was David, not the junior analyst from Emily's team, but a different David, who'd taught himself graphic design while working overnight shifts at a warehouse. Each had a story of potential waiting to be recognized. Emily gave them what Alexander had given her, a chance to prove themselves. The program included job shadowing, skills training, mentorship from current employees. Some participants would transition into full-time positions. Others would gain skills and experience to pursue opportunities elsewhere. All of them would leave more visible than they'd arrived. 3 months into the program, Emily received an email that made her stop breathing. The subject line read, "Harvard Business Review Feature Request." A journalist wanted to interview her about the Workforce Development Program and her own journey from hotel housekeeper to corporate consultant. The story was gaining attention, not just locally, but nationally. Other companies were reaching out, asking about replicating the model. Emily forwarded the email to Alexander with a note. "Is this real? Should I do this?" His response came within minutes. "Completely real. Absolutely do it. Your story deserves to be told." The interview happened 2 weeks later over video call. The journalist, a woman named Rebecca Chen, no relation to their Shanghai partner, was warm and professional, asking thoughtful questions about Emily's background, her vision for the program, the challenges she'd faced. "What would you say to people who claim you only got your position because of personal connections rather than qualifications?" Rebecca asked. Emily had known this question was coming. She'd prepared for it. "I'd say they're partially right," she said calmly. "I did get my position through a personal connection, but that connection was formed by stepping forward when I saw a problem I could solve. The qualifications were always there. The opportunity to use them wasn't. Alexander Cole created that opportunity." She paused. "And yes, I didn't have traditional credentials, but I had skills I'd spent years developing, knowledge I'd earned through thousands of hours of self-directed learning. The question isn't whether I was qualified, it's why we only recognize certain types of qualifications." Rebecca smiled. "That's a powerful distinction. It's the foundation of our workforce development program. We're not lowering standards, we're expanding our definition of what qualified looks like." The article published 6 weeks later under the headline, "From Invisible to Indispensable: How One Company is Revolutionizing Talent Recognition." It featured Emily's story, the program's early successes, and commentary from business leaders about the need to rethink traditional hiring practices. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Emily's inbox flooded with emails, from companies wanting to implement similar programs, from individuals sharing their own stories of overlooked potential, from journalists requesting follow-up interviews. Her LinkedIn profile, which she'd barely maintained, suddenly had thousands of connection requests. The local news wanted to do a segment. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. "You're becoming the face of this movement," Sarah said one evening, scrolling through the social media response. "How does that feel?" Emily thought about it. Like responsibility. Like I need to make sure I do right by everyone who sees themselves in my story. "You will," Sarah said confidently. "You already are." On a Friday afternoon in early March, 6 months after Emily had walked into the Skyline Grand Hotel for the last time as an employee, she returned once more. This time, she was speaking at a workforce development conference being held in the hotel's main ballroom. The irony wasn't lost on her. She stood backstage listening to the introduction being given by the conference organizer and felt the familiar flutter of nerves. Our keynote speaker needs no introduction to anyone following innovations in talent development. In less than a year, she's transformed from hotel housekeeper to corporate consultant to the architect of a workforce development program that's changing how companies think about untapped potential. Please welcome Emily Carter. Emily walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. The ballroom was packed. HR professionals, business leaders, nonprofit directors, people who believed in the power of recognizing overlooked talent. And there, in the third row, she spotted familiar faces. Alexander sat beside Lily, who was supposed to be in school but had apparently been granted a special exception. Marcus and Jennifer sat nearby. David, the analyst, gave her a thumbs up. Even Raj was there, camera in hand, official photographer for the event. Emily approached the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and began. 6 months ago, I was cleaning the toilets in this building. Today, I'm standing on this stage telling you that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. My job, our job, is to change that. She spoke for 30 minutes about her journey, about the program, about the faces behind the statistics, about Maria, who is now working in the company's Latin American division, about David, the graphic designer, who'd landed a position in marketing, about the other participants finding their way forward. She spoke about her mother, who'd worked herself to exhaustion and died never knowing her daughter would one day stand on a stage like this. And she spoke about the future, about expanding the program, about challenging companies to look beyond traditional credentials, about building systems that recognize potential instead of just pedigree. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. The Q&A session that followed ran long, with people asking about implementation details, success metrics, how to overcome resistance from traditional hiring managers. Emily answered every question with the same careful thought she brought to everything else. But underneath the professional responses was something deeper: purpose. For the first time in her life, Emily wasn't just surviving. She was building something meaningful, something that would outlast her, something that would create opportunities for people who needed them. After the conference ended, Alexander found her in the lobby. "That was remarkable," he said simply. "Thank you for making it possible. I gave you an opportunity. You did everything else." Lily tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "Daddy, can Emily come to dinner with us, please?" Alexander looked at Emily questioningly. "We're just going to grab pizza, nothing fancy. But you're welcome to join us if you'd like." Emily hesitated, thinking about optics, about gossip, about all the careful boundaries she'd maintained. Then she looked at Lily's hopeful face and made a different choice. "I'd love to," she said. They went to a casual pizza place near Alexander's house, the kind with checkered tablecloths and crayons for kids and absolutely no pretense. Lily chattered about school and her science project and the book they were reading together. Alexander listened with patient attention, asking questions, laughing at her jokes. Emily watched them and saw something that reminded her of her own childhood, before her mother got sick, when dinner had been simple and full of warmth. "Emily speaks lots of languages," Lily announced to the server when she came to take their order. "She's really smart." "That's wonderful," the server said, smiling at Emily with the kind of polite interest reserved for humoring children. "She used to clean hotel rooms," Lily continued, "but now she helps people get better jobs. She's basically a superhero." The server's expression shifted, genuine interest replacing polite dismissal. "That's actually really cool," she said. "I'm working on my degree online while I do this. People always assume serving is all I can do." Emily felt something click into place. "What are you studying?" "Social work? I want to help kids in the foster system. That's important work, Emily said. Have you looked into the county's partnership programs? They sometimes offer internships that count as course credit. The server's eyes lit up. I didn't know that. Where would I find information? Emily pulled out her phone, found the relevant website, and showed her. After the server left with their order, Alexander smiled at Emily. You can't help yourself, can you? Always looking for talent. It's everywhere, Emily said. You just have to pay attention. Later, after pizza and terrible arcade games and Lily's declaration that this was the best Friday ever, Alexander drove Emily back to her car at the conference center. Thank you for coming, he said. Lily's been talking about you since you helped when she was sick. I think you've become her favorite person who's not me. She's a great kid. She is, and she's lucky to have people like you in her life. Role models who show her that success comes from hard work and courage, not just privilege. Emily looked at him in the dim light of the parking lot. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really hire me? The honest answer. Alexander considered the question carefully. Because when I looked at you in that hotel lounge, I saw someone who'd been invisible for so long they'd forgotten they deserved to be seen, and I knew what that felt like. You're a billionaire CEO. When were you ever invisible? Before I built the company, when I was nobody special, I had ideas nobody would listen to. I had potential nobody recognized. I was invisible in a different way. Visible as a body, but invisible as a mind worth hearing. He paused. Then someone took a chance on me. Believed in an idea when everyone else said it would fail. That chance changed my life. When I saw you step forward in that lounge, I saw someone who'd spent years developing skills nobody asked about, working hard at things nobody valued. You deserved a chance, so I gave you one. And now I'm giving others the same chance, Emily said softly. Now you're giving others the same chance, Alexander agreed, which is exactly how it should work. Emily drove home that night thinking about chains of opportunity, how one person's chance could ripple outward, creating possibilities for dozens, hundreds, thousands of others. She thought about her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs and never got her chance. She thought about Raj and Maria and all the others who were getting theirs. And she thought about the future, about how many more chances she could create. When she got home, Sarah was waiting with champagne and a printed copy of the Harvard Business Review article. You're famous, Sarah announced, handing Emily a glass. My roommate is officially famous. I'm not famous, I'm just... Stop, Sarah interrupted. You are amazing and successful and making a real difference in the world. Own it. Emily looked at the article, at her own words printed in a prestigious publication, and felt something she'd rarely allowed herself to feel. Pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride in what she'd accomplished. Okay, she said, raising her glass. I'll own it. They drank to new beginnings, to chances taken, to the remarkable distance between cleaning hotel floors and changing people's lives. And for the first time since her mother died, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Spring arrived in Chicago with the kind of optimism that made even cynics believe in new beginnings. Emily watched the city transform from her office window, trees budding along Michigan Avenue, people shedding their heavy coats, the whole world seeming to shake off winter's weight. She felt that same transformation happening inside herself. 9 months had passed since the day she'd stepped into the executive lounge with nothing but a cleaning cart and courage. 9 months since everything changed. The workforce development program was exceeding all projections. The first cohort had graduated with an 85% placement rate, either within the company or at partner organizations. The second cohort had just started, with twice as many applicants as spots available. Other companies were implementing similar programs, citing Emily's model as inspiration. But success, Emily was learning, came with its own complications. She was preparing for a presentation to potential corporate partners when Patricia knocked on her office door, expression unreadable. Emily, do you have a moment? There's someone here to see you. I don't have anything on my calendar. I know she doesn't have an appointment, but she said it's important. Emily followed Patricia to the reception area, curiosity mixing with concern. A woman stood near the windows, back to the door, shoulders rigid with tension. She was probably in her early 50s, dressed in clothes that had once been expensive but were now worn at the edges. The uniform of someone who'd known better days and was trying to maintain dignity despite circumstances. Emily Carter? The woman turned and Emily's breath caught. She looked familiar in a way Emily couldn't quite place. Something about the eyes, the shape of her face. Yes. Can I help you? The woman's hands twisted together. You don't know me. My name is Margaret Walsh. I'm your mother's sister. The world tilted sideways. Emily's mother had been an only child. She'd said so countless times. There were no relatives, no extended family, just the two of them against the world. That's not possible, Emily said carefully. My mother didn't have siblings. She told you that? Margaret's laugh was bitter. Of course she did. After what I did, I can't blame her. Patricia, reading the tension in the room, quietly excused herself. Emily gestured to the seating area, mind racing. Maybe we should sit down. They settled into the modern furniture, and Margaret pulled out a worn photo from her purse. It showed two young girls, maybe 8 and 10, arms around each other, grinning at the camera. Emily recognized one of them immediately, her mother, younger than Emily had ever seen her, but unmistakably her. That's us, Margaret said softly, before everything fell apart. The story came out slowly, painfully. Two sisters who'd been close until Margaret married a wealthy man and moved into a different world. How she'd grown ashamed of her working-class background, of her sister who cleaned houses while Margaret attended charity galas. I cut her off, Margaret said, voice breaking. When she needed help with your medical bills. You had pneumonia when you were 6, do you remember? She called me, begged me for a loan, and I said no. I said I couldn't enable her poor choices. Emily did remember being sick, remembered the hospital, her mother's worried face, the bills that had followed them for years. She never asked me for anything again, Margaret continued, and I told myself I was doing the right thing, teaching her about responsibility. But really, I was just ashamed of where I came from, of her, of myself. Tears tracked down her face. I didn't even know she died until 6 months after the funeral. A mutual friend finally tracked me down, told me. By then, you'd disappeared into the city, and I couldn't find you. I tried, Emily. I hired investigators, checked hospitals and homeless shelters, terrified you'd ended up on the streets. I was fine, Emily interrupted, voice harder than she'd intended. I was working, supporting myself, the way Mom taught me to. I know, I saw the article about you. That's how I finally found you. Margaret looked at her with desperate hope. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I wanted you to know that your mother had family, that I'm sorry, that if I could go back and change everything, I would. Emily sat in silence, processing information that rewrote her entire understanding of her childhood. Her mother had had a sister, had been rejected by that sister, had chosen to tell Emily she was alone rather than explain that their family had abandoned them. The hurt of it was staggering, but so was the loneliness her mother must have felt. Why now? Emily asked. Why show up after all these years? Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. Because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, the same thing that took your mother, the same disease, the same cruel genetic lottery. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less, Margaret continued, and I realized I was about to die the same way I lived. Alone, cut off from everyone who mattered because of my own pride and stupidity. She met Emily's eyes directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your mother was loved, that I loved her even when I was too broken to show it, and that I'm proud of what you've become, even though I had nothing to do with it. Emily felt tears burning behind her eyes. This woman was a stranger, but she was also family, complicated, flawed, human family. What do you want from me? Emily asked quietly. Nothing. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry, and to give you this. Margaret pulled an envelope from her purse. Letters your mother wrote me over the years. I never responded, but I kept every one. I thought you might want them. Emily took the envelope with shaking hands. Through the paper, she could feel multiple letters, her mother's handwriting visible through the translucent material. Words from beyond the grave. Thank you, Emily managed. Margaret stood, gathering her things. I should go. I know this is a lot to process. Wait. Emily stood too, heart pounding. You said 6 months. Do you have somewhere to stay? Someone taking care of you? Margaret's smile was sad. I have hospice arranged, a small apartment. I'll manage." "That's not what I asked." Something her mother had taught her, demonstrated through every action. You didn't abandon people, even when they'd abandoned you, especially then. "Let me give you my number," Emily said. "And if you need anything, rides to appointments, someone to talk to, whatever, call me." Margaret's composure crumbled. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to." They exchanged numbers, and Margaret left with tears streaming down her face, thanking Emily over and over. After she was gone, Emily sat in the empty reception area, holding the envelope of letters, trying to reconcile this new version of her history with the one she'd always believed. Alexander found her there 20 minutes later. "Patricia said you had an unexpected visitor. Everything okay?" Emily looked up at him, and suddenly the whole story poured out. The aunt she'd never known existed, her mother's hidden pain, the letters in her hands. Alexander listened without interrupting, then sat down beside her. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to read these letters immediately. Part of me wants to burn them and pretend today never happened." "And the other part?" Emily thought about it. "The other part knows my mother kept these letters secret for a reason. She was protecting me from the hurt of rejection, but she also kept loving her sister despite that rejection." She looked at the envelope. "I think I need to honor both things, the protection and the love." Alexander nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think your mother would be proud of how you handled that. Extending kindness to someone who didn't earn it, that takes more strength than cutting them off would. Or maybe it's just stupid." "It's not stupid. It's grace." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, you have that presentation in an hour. Let's get you ready." Emily let him pull her to her feet, grateful for the anchor of work, of purpose, of things she could control. She tucked the letters into her bag to read later when she was ready. The presentation went well despite Emily's distraction. 3 major corporations committed to implementing workforce development programs modeled on hers, with Emily's team consulting on the rollout. It should have felt like a victory, and it did, mostly. But underneath the professional satisfaction was a deeper turmoil. That evening, Emily sat in her apartment, a nicer place now, with windows that actually closed and heat that worked consistently, and finally opened the envelope Margaret had given her. 12 letters spanning 15 years, written in her mother's familiar handwriting. Emily started with the oldest one, dated 2 years before she was born. "Dear Maggie," it began, using a nickname Emily had never heard. "I know you're angry with me for marrying Joseph. I know you think I'm making a mistake. Maybe I am. But I love him. And I'm asking you to be happy for me, or at least to not hate me for choosing differently than you would." The letters painted a picture of 2 sisters growing apart, despite one's desperate attempts to maintain connection. Her mother writing about getting pregnant, about Emily's birth, about Joseph leaving when Emily was 6 months old, about struggling to make rent while Margaret's Christmas cards showed professionally photographed family portraits and exotic vacation destinations, about swallowing pride to ask for help when Emily was sick and the crushing silence that followed. The later letters were shorter, less hopeful, but still reaching out. Updates on Emily's achievements, honor roll, acceptance to Northwestern, the scholarship that almost covered tuition. The last letter was dated 3 months before her mother's diagnosis. "Dear Maggie, I don't know if you still read these or if they go straight to the trash, but I wanted you to know that Emily is extraordinary. She's teaching herself Mandarin from library books because she wants to help people communicate across language barriers. She has your intelligence and my stubbornness, and I think she's going to do remarkable things with her life. I wish you could know her. I wish a lot of things, but mostly I wish you peace wherever you are. Your sister, Catherine." Emily pressed the letter to her chest and let herself cry. For her mother's lonely persistence, for the relationship that could have been. For all the years Margaret had missed knowing someone who would have loved her despite her flaws. When the tears finally stopped, Emily pulled out her phone and called the number Margaret had given her. It rang 4 times before a weak voice answered. "Hello? Margaret? It's Emily. I read the letters." A sharp intake of breath. "Oh, my mother never stopped loving you, even when you hurt her, even when you abandoned us. She kept writing, kept hoping." Silence on the other end, then quiet sobbing. "I can't be what she was," Emily continued. I can't write you letters for 15 years hoping you'll respond, but I can be here for the time you have left. If you want that, why would you do that? Because holding on to anger takes energy I'd rather spend on something else. Because my mother taught me that family is about choice, not just blood. And because nobody should die alone. Over the next few weeks, Emily visited Margaret twice a week. They talked about Catherine, Emily's mother, and slowly, carefully, began building something that resembled connection. Margaret shared stories from their childhood. Catherine's fierce protectiveness when kids teased Margaret for her hand-me-down clothes. How Catherine had dreamed of being a teacher but couldn't afford college. She was brilliant, Margaret said during one visit, her voice weak but clear. Smarter than me, though I'd never have admitted it back then. She could have been anything. She was everything that mattered, Emily said. She was kind and hardworking, and she loved me unconditionally. That's more important than any career. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You sound just like her. Emily took that as the compliment it was meant to be. At work, the Seoul expansion was moving forward successfully. The Shanghai partnership had yielded even better results than projected. Emily's role had evolved beyond cultural liaison. She was now Director of Global Workforce Development, with a team of 5 people working under her. The girl who'd cleaned toilets less than a year ago now had direct reports and a title that required business cards. One afternoon in late May, Alexander called her into his office. Lily was there too, swinging her legs from a chair that was too big for her, grinning around her newly grown-in front teeth. "We have a proposition," Alexander said. "We're going to Shanghai," Lily announced before he could continue, "for the big signing ceremony. And Daddy said you have to come too because you're the reason the whole thing worked." Emily looked at Alexander questioningly. "The formal contract signing is scheduled for June 15th, he explained. "Chen's team wants you there specifically. They've requested that you oversee the cultural aspects of the ceremony." "Shanghai," Emily said, testing the word. She'd never been on a plane before, let alone to another country. 2 weeks, all expenses paid, 5-star accommodations, Alexander continued. "You'd be there as a senior member of the negotiating team. And Emily, this is important. They specifically asked for you, not just a translator, you." Lily bounced in her seat. "Say yes, please say yes. Daddy says Shanghai has the tallest buildings in the world, and we can go up in them and see everything." Emily looked at this little girl who'd somehow become part of her life, at Alexander who'd seen her when she was invisible, at the opportunity that represented everything she'd worked toward. "Yes," she said, "I'll go." Lily's cheer could probably be heard 3 floors down. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Emily coordinated with Chen's team on ceremony protocols, worked with her own team to ensure the workforce development program would run smoothly in her absence, and tried not to panic about international travel. Sarah helped her shop for appropriate business attire for China, more formal than American standards, conservative cuts, quality fabrics. "You're going to knock them dead," Sarah said, watching Emily try on a tailored navy suit that actually fit perfectly. "My little roommate, international business consultant." "I'm terrified," Emily admitted. "Good. You do your best work terrified." The night before the flight, Emily visited Margaret one last time. The cancer was progressing rapidly now. Margaret spent most days in bed, pain medications keeping her comfortable but increasingly disconnected. But when Emily arrived, her eyes were clear. "Shanghai tomorrow," Margaret said. "Your mother would be so proud." "I wish she could see it." "She can." Margaret's hand found Emily's. "I believe that. I have to believe that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, 2 women connected by grief and grace, and the complicated legacy of the woman who'd loved them both. "Thank you," Margaret whispered, "for giving me these last few weeks, for letting me know Catherine through you. Thank you for the letters, for keeping them even when you didn't respond." "I was always going to respond," Margaret said. "I just never found the courage, until it was too late." Emily squeezed her hand gently. "You found it when it mattered." The flight to Shanghai was 15 hours of surreal luxury in business class. Alexander had insisted, saying economy for that distance was inhumane. Emily spent most of it staring out the window when she wasn't sleeping in a seat that reclined into an actual bed. Lily kept sneaking back from her seat near Alexander to show Emily things. The entertainment system, the hot towels the flight attendants brought, the elaborate meal service. "This is the coolest thing ever," Lily whispered, eyes shining with excitement. Emily had to agree. Shanghai emerged from the haze like something from a dream. Endless towers of glass and steel, the Huangpu River snaking through the city, modernity and tradition existing in impossible proximity. Their hotel was in Pudong, facing the bund across the river. Emily's room was larger than her first apartment, with views that made her catch her breath. But there was no time to enjoy it. The ceremony was tomorrow, and there were final details to coordinate. Emily spent the afternoon with Chen's team, reviewing every element of the signing ceremony. The seating arrangements that honored business hierarchies. The gift exchange protocols. The significance of colors and numbers in the decorations. Mr. Chen himself joined the meeting for the last hour. "Miss Carter," he said warmly in Mandarin, "it is an honor to finally meet you in person. Your cultural guidance has been invaluable to this partnership." "The honor is mine, Mr. Chen. Your trust in our company means everything." They spoke for a while about the ceremony, about the partnership's potential, about the broader implications for both companies. Then Mr. Chen said something that surprised her. "I understand you've created a program to identify overlooked talent in your country. This is admirable. In China, we have similar issues, many capable people in positions that don't utilize their full potential. Have you considered implementing something similar?" "I have now," he smiled. "Perhaps we could discuss a partnership on this as well. Your expertise combined with our infrastructure could help many people." Emily felt excitement building. "I would love to explore that." The signing ceremony took place in a grand hotel ballroom that had been transformed into something breathtaking. Red and gold decorations, traditional Chinese elements blended with modern aesthetics, everything calibrated to honor both cultures equally. Emily had helped design every detail, and seeing it executed perfectly was deeply satisfying. The ceremony itself was formal and precise. Speeches in both languages, which Emily translated with the same careful attention she brought to everything. The actual contract signing, witnessed by dozens of executives and stakeholders from both companies. Photography that would be used in press releases and marketing materials. And through all of it, Emily felt the weight of how far she'd come. From invisible cleaner to international business consultant, facilitating partnerships worth hundreds of millions of dollars. After the ceremony, there was a formal dinner that lasted hours, course after course, toasts and speeches, relationship building disguised as celebration. Emily navigated it all with growing confidence, moving between languages, between cultures, building bridges with every conversation. Near the end of the evening, Mr. Chen approached her with a small group of executives. "Miss Carter, my colleagues and I have been discussing your workforce development program. We would like to formally propose a partnership to implement something similar in China, with your team consulting on the framework." Emily's heart raced. That would be incredible. "I'd need to discuss it with my company." Of course, Mr. Chen agreed, "but I have already spoken with Mr. Cole. He believes you are the perfect person to lead such an initiative." Emily found Alexander across the room. He raised his glass slightly, smiling. The expansion of her program to China was finalized over the next few days. Emily would return in 3 months to begin implementation, working with a team from both companies to adapt the model for Chinese business culture and labor markets. It was more than she'd dreamed, more than she'd thought possible. On their last night in Shanghai, Alexander took Emily and Lily to a restaurant at the top of Shanghai Tower, the second tallest building in the world, where the city spread out below them like a galaxy of lights. "To new partnerships," Alexander said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Emily added. Lily, drinking apple juice from a fancy glass, chimed in with, "To the tallest buildings." They laughed and drank and watched the city glow. "You know what amazes me?" Alexander said after a while. 9 months ago, you were terrified to step into that conference room. Now you're negotiating international partnerships with some of the most powerful business leaders in Asia. 9 months ago, I thought my ceiling was clean floors and satisfied guests," Emily said. "Turns out I'd just never seen the sky." "You made yourself visible," Alexander said. "That's what changed everything." Emily thought about that, about the choice to step forward instead of staying back, about speaking up when silence would have been safer. "No," she said slowly. "You made me visible. You saw something when everyone else looked past it. Then let's say we both did our part, Alexander suggested. I saw potential. You proved me right. When they returned to Chicago 3 days later, Emily went straight from the airport to see Margaret. The hospice nurse met her at the door, expression sympathetic. She's been waiting for you. She's very weak now. Margaret lay in bed, looking smaller than Emily remembered, but her eyes opened when Emily entered. Shanghai, she whispered. Tell me. So Emily did. She described the ceremony, the city, the views from Shanghai Tower. She talked about the partnership expansion, about taking her program global, about everything her mother would have loved to hear. Margaret listened with a soft smile, tears tracking down her thin face. Catherine would be so proud, she said when Emily finished. I wish she could see you. I think she can, Emily said, echoing Margaret's earlier words. I have to believe that. Margaret's hand found hers, grip weak but determined. Promise me something. Anything. Don't waste time on regret the way I did. Don't let pride or fear keep you from the people who matter. Life is too short for that kind of stupidity. I promise, Emily said. Margaret died 3 days later, peacefully in her sleep. Emily arranged the funeral, small, simple, attended by the few people who'd known Margaret in her final weeks. The hospice nurse, a neighbor, a handful of old acquaintances who'd heard through mutual connections, and Emily, standing at the front, delivering a eulogy for a woman she'd known for less than 2 months. Margaret Walsh made mistakes, Emily said, looking at the gathered faces. She let pride damage relationships that mattered. She waited too long to make amends, but in her final weeks she showed me something important, that it's never too late to choose love over anger, that grace matters more than being right, that family is about who shows up, not just who shares your blood. She paused, throat tight. My mother loved her sister her whole life, even when that love wasn't returned. Margaret loved her sister too, even when she couldn't show it. And in the end, that love was what mattered. Not the years of silence, not the hurt or pride, just the love. After the service, Emily scattered Margaret's ashes in Lake Michigan, along with one of her mother's old letters. The last one, about Emily being extraordinary. Sisters together again, finally. Walking back to her car, Emily felt something shift inside her, a releasing of old pain, old resentment about the hand life had dealt her. She'd lost both her mother and the aunt she'd barely known. But she'd also gained something, understanding, perspective, the knowledge that love persisted even through rejection and loss. And she'd learned that visibility wasn't just about being seen by others. It was about seeing yourself clearly, recognizing your own worth, refusing to stay small when you were capable of so much more. At work, the expanded workforce development program was attracting international attention. Companies from 6 countries had reached out about implementing similar initiatives. Emily's team had grown to 15 people, with plans to double by year's end. The second cohort graduated with even better outcomes than the first. Maria had been promoted twice and was now managing Latin American partnerships. David, the graphic designer, had his work featured in a major advertising campaign. And Raj, quiet, uncertain Raj from the hotel, had enrolled in a photography program and was building a portfolio that was already attracting professional interest. Each success felt personal to Emily. Each person who found their path felt like validation of everything she'd built. One morning in late August, almost a year to the day since she'd translated that first call, Emily arrived at work to find an envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note from Alexander. Conference Room B, 9 a.m. Come prepared to be celebrated. Emily checked her watch. 8:47 a.m. She made her way to the conference room, curiosity building. The entire team was there. Jennifer, Marcus, David, her whole workforce development staff. Patricia stood near the door, grinning. Even Lily was there, supposedly at summer camp, but apparently playing hooky for this. What's going on? Emily asked. Alexander stood at the head of the table. Emily Carter, 1 year ago today, you stepped into a business meeting where you absolutely did not belong and saved a deal worth $500 million. In the years since, you've become one of this company's most valuable assets. He gestured to the table where a presentation folder lay. Your workforce development program has helped 78 people transition to better positions. Your cultural consulting has facilitated partnerships in 6 countries worth a combined $2 billion. And your vision has inspired companies around the world to rethink how they identify and develop talent. Emily felt heat rising to her cheeks. The board met yesterday, Alexander continued. We voted unanimously to promote you to Vice President of Global Workforce Development and Cultural Strategy. It comes with a substantial raise, expanded team, and a seat at the executive table. The room erupted in applause. Lily was jumping up and down. Jennifer was crying. Even Marcus, usually stoic, was beaming. Emily couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Do you accept? Alexander asked, smiling. Yes, of course, thank you. Thank you, Alexander said, for being exactly who you are, for seeing what others miss, for making this company and a lot of people's lives better. Later, after the celebration had dispersed and Emily sat alone in her office, soon to be a much larger office, apparently, she pulled out her phone and opened the photo app. The last photo she'd taken was from Shanghai Tower, the city at night, infinite light spreading toward every horizon. She sent it to her mother's disconnected number, along with a message. Made VP today, Mom. Wish you could see this. Wish you could see everything. I love you. The message didn't send, of course, but Emily sent it anyway. 6 months later, Emily stood in the Skyline Grand Hotel ballroom once again, but this time the conference was hers. The first annual Global Workforce Development Summit had attracted participants from 23 countries, companies sharing best practices for identifying overlooked talent, nonprofits presenting on partnership models, policymakers discussing systemic changes to education and employment pathways, and Emily delivering the opening keynote to an audience of 800 people. She looked out at the faces, HR professionals and business leaders, yes, but also service workers hoping to learn how to advocate for themselves, young people looking for pathways forward, anyone who'd ever felt invisible and was searching for a way to be seen. 18 months ago, Emily began, I was cleaning toilets in this building. I was invisible. Not because I lacked talent or skills or potential, but because nobody was looking. Because the systems we've built train us to overlook people who don't fit traditional molds of success. She clicked to her first slide, a photo of her mother in her housekeeping uniform, tired but smiling. This is my mother, Catherine Walsh. She was brilliant and hardworking and never got the opportunity to be anything except a housekeeper. Not because she wasn't capable, because capability wasn't enough when nobody was paying attention. Emily talked about her journey, but more than that, she talked about the 78 people who'd come through her program, the hundreds more who would follow, the thousands who would benefit as the model expanded globally. Talent is everywhere, she said, but opportunity is not. Our job, all of our jobs, is to change that, to look beyond credentials and pedigree, to see potential in unexpected places, to build systems that recognize brilliance wherever it appears. She paused, looking out at the audience. Because somewhere in this room right now is someone who could change the world if only they were given the chance. Somewhere out there is the next breakthrough innovation, the next transformative idea, locked inside someone who's cleaning floors or serving coffee or doing work that doesn't begin to use what they're capable of. She smiled. Our mission is to find them, to see them, to give them what they need to become what they're meant to be. The applause was thunderous. After the keynote, Emily spent hours in conversations, people sharing their stories, asking for advice, offering partnerships. A young woman approached near the end wearing a hotel uniform under her conference visitor badge. I work here, she said nervously, in housekeeping. I saw your name on the conference schedule and I had to come hear you speak. I'm glad you did, Emily said. What's your name? Jessica. I'm teaching myself coding, online courses, library computers, just like you did with languages. That's wonderful. Have you thought about what you want to do with those skills? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I want to do what you did. I want to prove that I'm more than what people assume when they see my uniform. Emily pulled out her business card, writing her personal email on the back. Send me your information. We have a tech partnership cohort starting in 3 months. I think you'd be perfect for it. Jessica stared at the card like it was made of gold. Really? Really? You've already done the hardest part, believing you deserve more and working toward it. Let me help with the rest. After Jessica left, Emily stood in the ballroom alone, looking at the empty chairs, the stage where she'd just delivered her keynote, the space that represented how far she'd come. Her phone buzzed, a text from Alexander. Brilliant keynote. Lily wants to know if you can come to dinner Sunday. She's making you something special. Emily smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. Sunday dinner at Alexander's house had become a regular occurrence over the past few months. Nothing romantic, just friendship, mentorship, and Lily's insistence that Emily was part of their family now. That Sunday, Lily met her at the door wearing an apron covered in flour. I made dumplings, she announced. Daddy helped, but I did most of it. They're a little weird-shaped, but they taste good. The dumplings were indeed weird-shaped, but Lily was right. They were delicious. Where did you learn to make these? Emily asked. From the internet. I wanted to make something from China because you go there for work, and I thought you'd like it. Emily's throat tightened with emotion. I love it. This is the best meal I've had in months. After dinner, Lily dragged Emily to her room to show her a school project, a presentation about inspiring women in history. The final slide was titled Emily Carter, Modern Hero. I know you're not in history yet, Lily said, but Mrs. Morrison said we could include people who are making history right now. And you are, right? Making history? Emily looked at the slide, which included photos of her speaking at conferences, a screenshot of the Harvard Business Review article, and a drawing Lily had made of Emily holding a sign that said, Everyone deserves a chance. I think I'm just trying to help people, Emily said softly. That's what heroes do, Lily said matter-of-factly. They help people. So you're a hero. That night, driving home through the city she'd once felt so lost in, Emily thought about heroism and visibility and the strange paths life could take. She thought about her mother, who'd worked herself to exhaustion and never lived to see her daughter's success. She thought about Margaret, who'd found grace at the end despite years of pride. She thought about Alexander, who'd seen potential when everyone else saw only a housekeeper. And she thought about all the people who were still invisible, still waiting for someone to notice, still working in silence toward dreams they barely dared to speak out loud. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Emily almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Emily Carter speaking. Ms. Carter, my name is Samantha Reed. I'm calling from the White House Office of Public Engagement. The administration is developing a national workforce initiative, and your program has been cited as a model. We'd like to invite you to Washington to consult on policy development. Emily pulled over to the side of the road, hands shaking. Yes, of course. I'd be honored. After the call ended, Emily sat in her parked car, staring at the Chicago skyline, trying to process how a year and a half ago she'd been invisible, and now the White House was asking for her expertise. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo gallery, scrolling back to a picture she'd taken on her last day working at the hotel, her cleaning cart, photographed from behind as she'd pushed it down an empty hallway for the final time. She looked at that image for a long moment, then archived it. Not to forget where she'd come from, but to acknowledge how far she'd traveled. The next morning, Emily walked into the office she'd once thought was impossibly grand and now felt like home. Her team was already gathering for their Monday morning meeting, 15 brilliant people who'd bought into her vision of making talent visible. Good morning, she said, settling into her chair. I have news. The White House called last night. They want to discuss scaling our program nationally. The room erupted in excited chatter. Before we get ahead of ourselves, Emily continued, we have work to do. Shanghai Cohort 3 starts next month. Seoul just approved their pilot program. And we have 73 applicants for our next Chicago cohort, which means we need to figure out how to expand capacity. She looked around the table at faces that were focused and eager and committed. We're changing lives, she said simply. Let's make sure we do it right. The meeting lasted 2 hours, covering logistics and challenges and opportunities. When it ended, Emily returned to her office, now on the executive floor with a view that still took her breath away, and found an email waiting. The subject line read, Thank you. It was from Jessica, the housekeeper from the summit. She'd applied for the tech partnership cohort and been accepted. The email was a single paragraph expressing gratitude so profound it brought tears to Emily's eyes. Emily responded, You earned this opportunity. Make the most of it, and someday pay it forward. That evening, Emily stood at her apartment window, a much nicer apartment now, in a building with an elevator and windows that actually sealed, and watched the city transition from day to night. She thought about the question Sarah had asked her a year ago. What if you're exactly where you're supposed to be? At the time, Emily hadn't known how to answer. Now she did. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because of destiny or fate, but because she'd chosen to step forward when stepping back would have been easier. Because she'd taken a chance on herself when nobody else would. Because she'd refused to stay invisible. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Documentary crew wants to interview you next week about the program. I told them you'd do it. You're welcome. Emily laughed and typed back, I should fire you as my unofficial publicist. You love me and you know it. She did. She loved Sarah and Alexander and Lily and her whole team and the work that gave her life meaning. She loved the person she'd become. Not perfect, still learning, still sometimes terrified, but no longer hiding, never hiding again. 2 years after Emily had stepped into that executive lounge with a cleaning cart and changed her life, she stood in Washington, D.C., briefing congressional staffers on workforce development policy. 3 years after, she published a book about recognizing overlooked talent that became required reading in business schools. 5 years after, her program had expanded to 42 countries, helping thousands of people transition from invisible to indispensable. But if you asked Emily what moment mattered most, she wouldn't point to any of those milestones. She'd point to a Sunday afternoon when she returned to the Skyline Grand Hotel one final time, walking into the employee break room where housekeeping staff gathered during shifts. Raj was there, working part-time while building his photography business. He saw her and grinned. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the room, may I present Emily Carter, former toilet scrubber, current vice president of Making the World Better. The room laughed. Emily hugged Raj and then addressed the gathered workers. I'm here because I want you to know something, she said. You are not defined by your current job. You are not limited by your current circumstances. You're capable of remarkable things if you're willing to work for them and brave enough to be seen. She pulled out a stack of information packets about her program. These are applications for our next cohort. If you have skills nobody's asked about, if you've been teaching yourself things on your own time, if you've been waiting for a chance, this is it. Apply. Let us see you. She left the packets on the break room table and walked out, knowing that at least 1 or 2 people in that room would take the chance, that at least one more invisible person would choose to be seen. And that was enough. That was everything. Emily Carter had learned the most important lesson life had to offer. The transformation doesn't happen by waiting to be discovered. It happens by discovering yourself first, then having the courage to show the world what you found. She'd been invisible for so long that becoming visible felt like being reborn. And now she spent her life helping others experience that same rebirth. One chance at a time, one brave moment at a time, one person willing to step forward at a time. Because that's how the world changed, not through grand gestures or sweeping reforms, but through individual acts of courage, through people who refused to stay small when they were capable of being so much more. Emily had stopped being invisible, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure others could do the same.